going to use my gavel. Welcome. Thank you for coming. I call to order the Murray City Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, October 21st, 2021. It is 6:30 p.m. Present, we have Commissioners Travis Nate and Lisa Milkevich and Ned Hacker and Sue Wilson and Jeremy Lowry and Jake Pearson. I am Maren Patterson and I am the chair this evening. From staff, we have Susan Nixon and Zachary Smallwood and Jared Hall and Melinda Greenwood. And I'm sure Brent Farnsworth is here with us. Okay, we want to welcome you to the meeting and go over some just kind of business items for you. We are grateful that you are here and we're thankful that you're participating in our meetings. Some etiquette items to review. We ask that you take a moment to silence all of your cell phones, please. And if you need to take a call, please step out into the hallway. When it comes time, if you would like to make a public comment on one of our agenda items, there will be an opportunity for you to do that. We are asking that anyone that wants to make, I have a couple up here. If you would like to speak and make a public comment, there is a paper that you can fill out up here on this front table. So grab one of those and you can hand that to staff when you have filled that out. When it is your time to come up, we would ask that you come to the podium and speak into the microphone and state your name and address for the record. All comments are 3 minutes long, and we will be timing you to just keep them succinct, and we can go over that a little bit more when we get to the public comment portion of the meeting. Okay, so we'll start with our agenda items. Our first item is approval of minutes. We don't have any minutes from our October 7th meeting, so we will move on to a conflict of interest. Do the commissioners have any conflict of interest with any of the agenda items this evening?
No.
And I would just like to explain that I am acquainted with Gary Hallen, but it will not affect my voting or it won't influence his application in any way.
Great, thank you. All right, agenda item number 3, approval of our findings of facts. We had a conditional use permit for 4800 Lofts LLC. Have the commissioners had an opportunity to review the findings of facts and conclusions?
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve those?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve the findings of fact for a conditional use permit for John Thomas and Kyle Dinos, 4800 Lots LLC, located at 380 West, 4850 South, and 447 West, 4800 South.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Moving on to our conditional use permits. We have conditional use to allow auto sales for Karim Auto, located at 150 West, 4800 South, units 30 and 31. Are the applicants with us this evening? Yes, wonderful. All right, first we'll have our staff report.
Thank you. Is this on? Can you hear me? It is on. Oh, just got to talk louder.
Yeah.
Okay, so this application for auto sales is submitted for Karim Auto on behalf of Abdullah Karim Alazawi. The property is located within our MG manufacturing zone. As you can see, the project accesses off of 4800 South by way of a private drive. The driveway is approximately 1,000 feet in length, and so it's at the far north end on a private road. Auto sales are a conditional use in our MG manufacturing zone, and he's applied for the auto sales in units 30 and 31. Here are some photos that were taken yesterday. He's currently in unit number 30 and plans to expand into unit 31, and each unit will have in unit 1, we'll have auto repair and auto body. In the other unit would have auto sales. So the unit that is currently under auto body is unit 30, and he would move also into auto 31, unit 31. Sorry, I'm kind of stumbling here. So the floor plan for the units show that each unit is approximately 2,400 square feet for a total of 4,800 square feet. It also has a small office of 15 by 26 and a small restroom and then the balance is either work area, warehouse, or workstation. Oops, whoops. Parking for auto body repair is based on, auto body repair and auto sales is based on the use of the square footage. So the office area equates to one space for 250 square feet. Warehouse is one per 750, or if there are overhead doors, we require 3 stalls. So based on the total of those 3 separate uses, he is required to have a minimum of 9 parking stalls. He has been allotted 18 parking stalls, and so any balance that he's not required, he would be able to have auto display vehicles. He will store some of his sales vehicles inside Unit 31 and then have the auto repair in 30. So whatever he could fit in Unit 31 that the fire department will approve, then he could have. And then whatever the balance of parking is in the parking lot. So based on his application and review of this, we are recommending approval based on the 7 conditions outlined as presented above. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for staff? Okay. Thank you so much. We'll have the applicant please come to the podium. Hi, welcome.
Welcome, thank you.
If you could state your name and address for the record.
My name is Abdul Karim Al Hasnawi. My address 4800 South, 150 West, shop number 30 and 31.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have you had an opportunity to review the conditions, the 7 conditions for your approval?
Huh?
موعد
إيه.
هاي السبعة اللي تقول لا مو هاي. The ones right here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. And you'll be able to comply with those?
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. Is there any additional information you'd like to tell us about your application?
Did you make sure?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, I will now open this meeting for public comment regarding this item. If anyone would like to speak to this application, they can come to the podium and do so. All right, seeing none, I will close the public comment portion and bring it back to the council for further discussion or a motion.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the Planning Commission approve conditional use permit to allow auto sales on the property addressed 150 West, 4800 South, units 30 and 31, subject to the conditions 1 through 7.
I'll second that.
Okay. I have a motion by Commissioner Hacker and a second by Commissioner Lowry to approve a conditional use permit to allow auto sales on the property just 150 West, 4800 South, units 30 and 31, subject to the 7 conditions. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, we can take a vote.
Okay, Mr. Ney,
Yes.
Ms. Mulkevich,
Yes.
Mr. Hacker,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Lowry,
Yes.
Mr. Pearson, excuse me,
Yes.
and Ms. Patterson.
Yes.
I do
So
have,
motion passes. Your conditional use permit is approved.
and Chair, he wanted me to mention to everybody that he did bring everyone treats out in the hall if you want to go out and have.
Thank you so much.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
I can say that now that the application's been approved, so.
Can we postpone the meeting for a little?
I was gonna say I'm gonna have to take a break. And you guys are free if you're now that your application's done, you can go if you need to. Thank you so much for coming. All right, and for bringing treats. That's exciting. All right, let's move on to agenda item number 5, zone map amendment from A1 to R18 low density single family for the property address 5700 South 800 West. Is the applicant with us this evening? Okay, wonderful. We'll first have our staff report.
Thank you, Chair Patterson. I appreciate that. So this is a request for a zone map amendment from A1 agricultural to R18 low density single family located at 5700 South 800 West. It's located just west of Vmu Elementary. Here you can see it's about 1.62 acres. It's located, like I mentioned, in the A1 zone. It's surrounded mostly by R18 zoning and single family homes in the area. The general plan lays out specific designations for properties for the entire city, and in this area, it's located in what's called the low density residential category, which includes the A1, R18, R16, other zones as well. So low density residential. Oh, I put a slide in here that shows what zones correspond. So the existing zoning, like I said, A1 proposed as R18. This is to allow for a potential subdivision. This does not require a change to the general plan because it is supported by the 2017 general plan. Let's see. A little bit of zone comparisons. I provided a table up here. Under the A1, a requirement of 1 acre minimum per lot is required. In the R18, it's 8,000 square feet per lot. Height is 35 feet in both the A1 and the R18. Front yard setback is a little different. Front yard in the A1 is 30, R18 is 25. Rear yard setback is 25 for both. The side yard setbacks in the R18 are a minimum of 8 on one side for a total of 20. So that's either 8 and 12, 10 and 10, however you get to 20. And corner yard setback are 20 feet. And there is a requirement of 2 off-street parking spaces for each dwelling. So findings, the general plan provides flexibility in implementation and execution of the goals and policies based on individual circumstances. The proposed zone amendment from A1 to R18 has been considered based on the site characteristics and the surrounding zoning in the area. And the potential impacts of the change can be managed with the densities and uses allowed. This has been during the application process. This request gets sent to various departments. So the police department, fire department, public works, which is what reviews all the infrastructure in the city, as well as the city engineer who looks at traffic as well. None of them stated any concerns with the proposal. So with that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested amendment from A1 to R18 at the property 5700 South, 800 West. Any questions I can answer at this point?
I have a question, Zach. So
Sure.
we got 1.62 acres there. So with the new zoning, what would be the maximum number of
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I
residences
should have looked
you
that
could
up.
potentially put on that parcel?
The maximum would be a maximum of 9. That's before taking out the road, which would be taken out during subdivision process. So
So realistically, 5 or 6.
realistically, 5 or 6.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions? Okay. If we could have the applicant come up and state your name and address for the record.
Joe Colosimo, 11795 South, Taitland Rose Lane, Draper, Utah. To answer your question, I've done a little bit of a layout and factoring in the roads and all the requirements of Murray City, I can get 7 8,400 square foot lots. So 5 or more like 7. So any
Great.
other questions that I can answer?
Yeah. Is there any additional information you would like to give us about this
I think
zone map?
Zach did a stellar
Yeah.
job.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
No.
All right. Thank you. Okay, we would like to open the meeting for public comment regarding this item. If you would like to make a comment, we ask that you please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record into the microphone. We ask that you please keep your thoughts to 3 minutes and that you offer new information in your comments. And the public comment portion of this meeting, we will address your questions or concerns by staff and the applicant after we close the public comment portion, okay? So is there anyone that would like to speak to this agenda item?
Pam Cotter, 752 Bouillon Street. Okay, so if you could pull that map back up. I have a question about the traffic. Is there any way that whoever in the city, when there are activities going on in Riverview and in Viewmont during the day or in the evening, there's no parking at all on the street. So as a citizen, I'm wondering if we could ask the school district if they could get a design team to get some parking in there. Because right now on 800 West Trip Lane, there is parking going on. If there's a soccer match going on in Viewmont and a baseball game going on in Riverview, then we have so much traffic that I've been hearing from the neighbors that they are very, 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 very concerned about this because we don't have that access now where NeighborWorks is going to be building. So we need to look at this really, really seriously because you're impacting a lot of homes. And we just don't have one parent that goes to Viewmont to drop their kids off. And we don't have one parent that drops their kids off to Riverview. There are many, many, many. And it would be nice if sometimes when we're on these planning and zoning or city council meetings, if we get up and we sit with our car and watch the constant stream of traffic that pours into Riverview. To get to Murray High, I substitute for Murray High, I have to be out on 7th West by no later than 7:20. If I'm not out on 7th West by 7:20, I'm going to be late to get to Murray High because we have parents from Horizon area bringing their kids over to Riverview. And because they can't make a left-hand turn, they have to make a right-hand turn, which impacts the other subdivisions. So it would be nice if someone in the city could talk to the school district about redesigning their parking. Because in about 2 weeks, we're going to have Halloween celebrations. And if you had kids that go to elementary schools, there's not just one car there. They're parked all the way on Bouillon, and they walk up to the schools. So it would be nice. The residents are very, very concerned about this one, and I'll get up and talk about the NeighborWorks also. But they are very, very, very concerned about this project and the other one.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to? Do you have a paper? They'd like to speak to this agenda item. Okay, then I will close the public comment period for this item. Zach, who would she talk to about the school? Probably just contact the school district?
Well, so what I could say specifically is that we do have quarterly, I believe it's quarterly, Melinda, coordinating meetings with the school district, and we can definitely bring that up in an upcoming in an upcoming meeting with them. So we are aware now that needs to be addressed and bring up additional parking at Riverview or Viewmont. That's definitely something that we can address. So,
and I think that's not something that's unique to these schools. I think lots of the elementary schools
Yeah.
struggle with parking on
Yeah,
parades
definitely.
or events or things
Of
like
course.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but that's definitely
Yeah.
heard.
So yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. The public comment period is closed.
Yeah, so we do understand. I can't address it as part of this
Right.
as part of this application.
Uh-huh.
The parking at the schools. We are aware of traffic issues with Riverview and Viewmont. We're acutely aware of it.
What would be the appropriate venue for a citizen to address those concerns?
Yeah, they could definitely reach out to the school district themselves, and they can definitely bring that up to the school district. And I apologize, I don't remember the gentleman's name. Do you?
Well,
Okay,
Jennifer Covington
that's
is
fine.
still the
Yeah.
superintendent.
Yeah, Jennifer Covington is the superintendent, so you could reach out to her office. Yeah.
And Madam Chair, I just feel it's important to say, I mean, it's not us and them, all of us up here have had kids in school or currently have the kids in school. And we agree, we've gone to events at schools recently. And we agree parking's an issue. It's just, that's not a topic for us to address here. We hear you, we agree, but
Yeah.
it's something to address with the school district. And we all, I've talked to the school district. I know other people in the committee as in the different role as a parent. But
Definitely.
And it's not only Riverview and this elementary school, it's a number of
Yeah.
them throughout the city.
all 8
So I
elementaries
think-
and all 2 junior highs and 1
I agree with
Senior high.
Lisa. You could tell them that the planning commission thinks this is a good idea to look at this.
How to
Yep.
increase parking at our schools.
We'll make sure it's brought up.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a recommendation of that we forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested amendment to the zoning map designation of the properties located at 5700 South, 800 West from A1 agricultural to R18 low density single family as described in the staff report.
I have a motion by Commissioner Wilson. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. I have a motion by Commissioner Wilson and a second by Commissioner Malkovich to forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested amendment to the zoning map designation of the properties located at 5700 South, 800 West from A1 agricultural to R18 low density single family as described in the staff report. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Okay, then we can take a vote.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Malkovich,
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lowry,
Yes.
Commissioner Ney,
Yes.
Commissioner Hacker,
Yes.
and Chair Patterson.
Yes.
Yep.
And I would just like to remind everyone that this is a recommendation to the City Council. So the City Council will also be hearing this same presentation, and you can have that opportunity to make your thoughts and concerns expressed to them as well. So, okay, we are moving on to agenda item number 6, 870 West Trip Lane, a zone map amendment as well. Is the applicant here? Okay, wonderful. We'll have our staff report.
Perfect. Thank you. Like you said, item number 6, Salt Lake Neighborhood Housing Services Incorporated, requesting a zone map amendment from R18, which is single family 8,000 square foot lots, to R16, single family 6,000 square foot lots. This is at 871 West Trip Lane. So this is actually just down the street from where we were just a second ago, along Trip Lane, west of Riverview Junior High. In the past, the applicants had come before you to change this from agricultural to R18. I think that was done a little over a year ago. Sorry, just getting that here. Yeah, September of 2019, so 2 years ago. Sorry about that. And in July of 2020, there was an opportunity to look at connecting the street, and that did not go forward. Connecting to, I apologize, Willow Grove Lane, which is down here on the south side, connecting to Trip Lane up here. That would have required eminent domain, and it was decided that that wasn't going to be used to use that option. And since the developer has gone through and went through that process, they are now requesting the R16 zone to help make the lots a little bit conform a little bit better to a cul-de-sac as well. They are in the R18 zone currently. These are pretty much the same slide, so I apologize. So the general plan lays out a future land use for every property. This is located in the low density residential, which again allows for the R18 and R16. So this does not require a general plan amendment. So some of the zone comparisons here. The biggest one is the 2,000 square foot lot difference. The R18 is 8,000 square feet. R16 is 6,000 square feet. You actually get a little bit lower height, 5 foot difference, a height max of 30 feet in the R16 as opposed to 35 in the R18. Front yard setback is a little bit less. It's 20 feet instead of 25. And side yard setbacks are 5 feet. And again, it still requires the 2 off-street parking spaces, so that's still required for every single family. Let's see. Okay, so overall, the planning division staff does recommend forwarding a recommendation of approval to the city council for the recommended zone change. So, are there any questions for me at this point?
Zach, is the applicant the Solid neighborhood housing, or is it Neighbor Works?
They're the same thing.
They are. Okay.
Yeah, they are the same body.
I'll just want to disclose that I, in the past, have served as on the loan committee for Neighbor Works in a volunteer position. It won't impact my opinion or judgment, though.
Okay, thank you for that. Oh, let me also. I apologize. I did miss a section here. We did mail out. Mailed out 90 notices to residents within 400 feet of the subject property. I received 2 phone calls concerned with traffic along Trip Lane, and 1 email in support of the zone change. And I believe you guys received additional comment in your packets and since then. So, okay. Any other questions I can answer?
Just one quick question on
Sure.
the change from R18 to R16. On how many houses would that increase add to the property?
Goodness gracious. So I apologize. I should have been prepared for that one too. But the applicants are proposing to go from 10 to 13.
So it's not a big change, just 10 to 10 houses to 13. But then you pick up the bonus of only having a 30-foot house, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. We will have the applicant come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Allison Treese, 4843 South Poplar Street.
Hi, thank you for being with us. Is there any additional information that you would like to give us about this application?
I just thank you for considering it. We've kind of been a long time coming on this project, and we just really appreciate all your hard work and Jared and his team and everyone else that's put into it. And we just really appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Then we will open this meeting for public comment regarding this item. Same thing, if you would like to make a public comment, we ask you please come to the podium. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this agenda item? And when you come up, you can fill it out after, I think.
Elizabeth, can you hear me?
Yeah, you just got to talk loud. Yeah.
Elizabeth Larson, 5659 South 800 West. My concern is, as kind of was mentioned about the traffic on Trip Lane with that, with 13 new homes. I'm fine with the homes and everything. I'm just mostly worried about if they've done any kind of a traffic study or impact study, because Trip Lane is extremely narrow. And I live right around the corner from Anderson Avenue, which is the street Viewmont's on, and it is way wider. And I think it accommodates school traffic much better than Trip Lane does. And I'm just concerned with that many more homes coming in there. I don't know what that's going to do. And I just wanted to kind of second the thoughts that have been expressed about problems with school. I believe when I compare Hillcrest and Riverview's way of dropping off kids, where people can drive to take kids, the safety, there's no comparison. There's two ways into Hillcrest from State Street and from 53rd. There's nice drop-off areas. It's so safe, and I just don't see that at Riverview, and I'm just wondering how this might impact it.
Is there any other public comments for this?
Pam Cotter, 752 Bouillon Street. Okay, so you were talking about how all the other schools were having impacts. We are a very unique neighborhood. We have a junior high and an elementary school. No other school has that in Murray School District. Also, if we as citizens are supposed to go to Murray School District on this issue, could the developers go also to Murray School District and ask them to have a design company come in and redo their parking?
Any other comments on this item? Okay.
Scott Hales, 820 West Trip Lane. I'm totally in favor of what NeighborWorks is trying to do here, and with their previous thing. But as has been expressed, both 8th West and Trip Lane are narrow streets, and we've lived there over 20 years, and it's just got worse and worse and worse. Either the 8th West and Trip Lane need to be widened, or something needs to happen with the streets in order to get people in and out of there. We had an occasion this last summer where there were 8 soccer games going on at Riverview and soccer games going on at Viewmont. We had to get out of our house to try to get up to 7th West to get to where we were going. That portion of 7th West, or of Trip Lane, was backed up clear to our house. A whole block. It's ridiculous. Saturdays, football happens over there. We had our mailbox knocked off of our post while we were out of town. But I mean, there's all kinds of issues here. The housing is great. I'm in favor of that. Get rid of that blank lot that's sitting there. But something needs to happen with the traffic. And I know that that's not something that you necessarily can consider, but the city needs to do something. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments? Okay, I will close the public comment portion and have staff maybe address some of these concerns. Zach, remind me, I feel like the first time they came when they were talking about connecting Trip Lane, there was a traffic study.
There was.
Done.
We believe that there was a traffic impact study done. The city engineer would have reviewed that. And from our recollection, it's not going to contribute significantly to the traffic that's already there. So
This zone change.
Yeah, this zone change wouldn't impact that. However, to address Ms. Cotter's point, yes. So the struggle here is you as the recommending body. We can't condition a rezone on somebody going forward to contact the school district. We as staff can go and address that. And one thing I did, we kind of talked about this just briefly between the two hearings, and the person who's over the facilities is named David Roberts. I would reach out to him. He kind of is over facilities for the school district, so he might be able to work on something. I have also, just personal anecdote, I drive 7th West every morning to the office and back home in the evening, and I do notice that Trip Lane is much more narrow than Anderson. So I could see that, and we can broach the topic with engineering about.
That was going to be my question about, expanding a narrow street. Are there options to do that?
And maybe we can work on something with the school district specifically on maybe, giving up some of their property there so that we can make that a wider road, so it doesn't impact the people that live on the northern side there. It's definitely something that we can look at and speak to the school district about going forward.
And Mr. Smallwood, we're it's kind of bringing up a different topic than we're on tonight.
Sure.
So for that purpose, I mean, if people are interested, they should stay engaged with the city.
Yes.
And continue that topic, because it's a different topic than we're voting on or talking about tonight. It's a good topic.
Yes,
it's just not what's
definitely.
in front of us at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. And we are very much aware of the traffic with Trip Lane and that entire area. I deal with it every morning too, so I know it.
But you saying that, we're just beginning the conversation. You're not
Yes.
promising to solve it, right?
Exactly. Just we want to have that conversation with the school district.
And I would, I think there's two different topics here. One is traffic flow. The other is parking, if I'm not mistaken. Would it be, aside from this motion, would it be appropriate for us to make another motion where we recommend that the city council request a public hearing with Murray School District and their superintendent? No?
No, that's not in our purview.
Then I think that's all we could do.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll let Melinda speak to.
Just to set some expectations, the school district is a completely separate body from the city. They're a completely different agency. By law, school districts are not subject to local zoning code for any city or municipality. So the city's ability to influence anything that a school district does is very minimal. So we can try and talk to them, but this simply really is a concern that you as residents should go to your school district about. We can try and have a conversation, but we don't have much influence. They're not subject to our zoning code. They can do what they want with their property without coming to the cities for approval. So it's very difficult for us to try and have any influence over an outcome like that.
And Melinda, from what you're saying, I'm hearing that you guys, the two entities are friends, and will talk to each other. And not saying that they won't listen. It's just they're not required to listen. So you're saying we will do what we've said. You will do what we've said. But the community should continue the conversation in other settings as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, you as residents would be able to influence the school district, I think, more than us as the city. The individuals who live in those neighborhoods and are impacted are the ones that should engage in the dialogue with the school district. And
So probably like attending school board meetings and saying, when you host multiple sports events at our schools all on the same day, you're affecting our neighborhood and things like that.
And this topic is really not germane to the subdivision. And as Mr. Smallwood mentioned, we can't make a condition of approval based on something that the property owner wouldn't have any ability to control, which is essentially why we're here again hearing this, because we when the commission approved the preliminary subdivision for the R18 zoning, it was with a through street, and that was also NeighborWorks couldn't control what happened with private property. The city council didn't vote to go through with the street, and that's why they're back here for the R16 zoning.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Is there any further discussion by the commission?
I just had a comment. I live in an R16 neighborhood, just so everybody knows. It's concerning to me a little bit that under the background review that it says the reason for this request is the result of time and money used to develop a new subdivision plan, which I understand why that is. I get it. There was, this through street we're all aware of, The developer was aware of that from the beginning, that may not go through. And this property sits in the middle of R18 zoning. And so in my mind, it should be R18. And I don't think that we should be making decisions to rezone something to make a property developable for a developer. That's just my comment.
I guess I'll counter that comment and simply say that it helps with affordable housing simply because it's less property, and so they are able to sell it for a slightly smaller or less price. It's not going to be significant, but it is slightly less. It's also more efficient use of the municipal water sewer because you're condensing what's going in there on that street instead of spreading it out over quarter acre or half acre lots. And so it is more efficient use of the infrastructure. So there are pros to it. Certainly it allows for a smaller home, and people tend to want the biggest home you can put on a piece of property. This does limit that in size, which also helps with affordability. So that's my only pushback on it.
Just to comment on what Commissioner Ney said, I completely agree with you. To that point, though, if we put townhomes on it, it would be even more efficient and we would use less water. And so as we increase density, we do gain efficiencies, and that's correct. I'm just saying this is in the middle of an R18 neighborhood, and I think it should be an R18 zone.
There's no connectivity to the majority of the R18 neighborhood. They're sharing a backyard fence. And so really their primary neighbor outside of the two homes that sit across from the softball fields are the school softball fields. And so
I agree. And to be fair, my R16 neighborhood is adjacent to an R18, and you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference between the two.
I was going to say, if you zoom out, I think just across 7th West is all R16 also. So just, not.
I don't believe, is that?
I think 7th West, yeah.
I just want to join the conversation. I appreciate this conversation, and I appreciate this commission because we have these conversations. And, I agree in the surface. It looks like we're changing a zone. Then when you dig into the details, it's 3 homes, no effect on infrastructure. I don't know. On the surface, you can make that argument. I think we dig into the detail, the argument gets watered down slightly.
I am looking at the zoning map, and from what I'm looking at, it's all R18. The only R16 is on the very, very west side of Murray City, where I live. There's a little R16.
I mean, I don't know. I don't have a map in front of me, but I know recently on the other side of 7th West, we've zoned some properties R16, and they've rebuilt some properties like that. I don't think it's.
Sorry. And I guess I say that also because I live in an area that's R18. That's my neighborhood. And my house fits the requirements for R16. There's houses in my R18 that are technically R16, so I don't think at this level, I mean, if we were talking condos, different conversation.
Right.
But when we're talking the difference between 10 and 13 houses, I don't know if anyone would notice that difference.
I completely agree with you. I'm agreeing with you on that. I don't think anybody would notice.
Okay, great.
And having coached softball there for over a decade, I can appreciate the traffic backups, especially if a bunch of people are trying to turn left off a trip lane during the 6 and 7 o'clock hour. It's quite miserable to try to get out of there in any meaningful way. And I've been there where you're hard pressed to even get your vehicle out, regardless of whether there's traffic, just because cars are parked so tight. And, police enforcement has been spotty at best, and it never really works out the way it's intended to. And so, I do appreciate your unique issue with it. It's got to be the school district willing to relent. And at least with my interactions with the softball league, my wife ran the league for a number of years. Trying to get anything from them was impossible, and we had to invest every penny in the fields that the school district owned. It's a tough fight. I encourage you to have the fight, but it's a tough fight.
Yeah. I think the tricky part, too, is that it would also be money for them, right? So any further parking, anything that they would add, that would also, that's money that we don't know what they have or don't have. Great discussion. Is there any further thoughts or a motion on this item?
It's a tough fight, but I think there's some safety issues there that the school's got to address. And I think we as all citizens here, myself included, and the staff, need that, make that clear, and the city council to the school board, that there's issues, not just turning issues, but safety issues, and it's not only during baseball or soccer, it's every day, coming and going. So with that, Madam Chair, could I make a motion?
Yes.
I make a motion that we forward a recommendation of approval to the city council for the requested amendment to the zoning map designation of the property located at 871 West Trip Lane from R18 low density single family to R16 medium density single family as described in the staff report.
Is there any discussion on that motion? Is there a second?
I'll second. Sorry, Sue.
Okay. I have a motion by Commissioner Hacker and a second by Commissioner Ney to forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested amendment to the zoning map designation of the property address 871 West Trip Lane from R18 low density single family to R16 medium density single family. We can take a vote.
Commissioner Hacker,
Yes.
Commissioner Ney,
Yes.
Commissioner Milkevich,
Yes.
Commissioner Lowry,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Pearson.
No.
And, and Chair Patterson.
Yes. All right. Motion for approval is forwarded to the City Council. So thank you for those comments and being with us. All right. We will move on to agenda item number 7, general plan amendment and zone map amendment. Is the applicant here, the Boyer Company? Okay, well, we'll have our presentation by staff. Oh, not enough seats. Okay, perfect.
Thanks. Thanks for having me tonight, and I'll get started, and I guess we'll have them in from the other room, so in the overflow, as it were. This is, as you said, Chair Patterson, an application that has two parts: a general plan amendment and a zone map amendment. The general plan amendment involves the map of the general plan, and we'll get to that in just a moment. It involves the future land use map. So we have a future land use map amendment and a zone map amendment request. The property owned by the Boyer Company at this point is the collection of these parcels that you see in yellow, the former R.C. Willey site, 9th East and Winchester Street. It is currently in the CD zone. You can see the red color is the CD zoning. There are several properties along 9th East that they do not own that are also in that same zone. And again, just to the west of them, the properties surrounding them mostly to the west and to the north are all single-family residential zoning, the R18. This is a segment from the future land use map. It does look very similar. The red color is general commercial, and the yellow that you see to the north of it is low-density residential. Just to give a little brief, quick overview of what the future land use map is, this is map 5.7 of the general plan, and what it does is identify every property in the city with a future land use category, a designation of what that property could be or should be. And the properties are currently in the in the general commercial category. And each category comes with some descriptors and some assigned zones that are appropriate for that category. In this case, the general plan, general commercial category is what you would expect, commercial for primarily retail, larger retail destinations rather. We did actually in the 2017 general plan anticipate that these kinds of changes would be requested in our commercial zones. We did not take the final step of adding mixed use zones to the general commercial category. We left just the CD development, but as you can see there, it says high density multifamily residential complexes will only be considered as part of a larger master planned mixed use development. Smaller scale medium density residential projects may be considered for neighborhood or community node areas. We did anticipate that the push to add residential to existing retail sites was coming. That's a trend that's been happening in the country for 15 to 20 years. So that's the current category. The requested category is specifically recently created for these two zones, the one of which has been requested. It's the Village and Centers mixed use. It's intended to be used, as it says, to provide an opportunity for the measured and context-sensitive addition of residential housing to existing commercial properties and developments along major transportation corridors and in and around retail and commercial centers and neighborhood nodes. I think it's important to note, and this is probably as good a place as any to do it in the presentation, that these two zones, and the reason that we created a different category, a different land use category for that future land use map to support these two zones, is because they are distinct. We have transit-oriented mixed-use zones that are located around our transit stations, Murray North and Murray Central stations specifically, and in our downtown. But in the further out areas of the city where these nodes were identified, as you can see in this kind of snippet from the general plan, one of the maps in the general plan, these areas of transition along corridors and at intersections that were important where we expected these pressures and where we might be able to appropriately implement some mixed use, it was going to need to be different. And it was going to be different in that it was going to be adding residential to existing commercial properties as opposed to raising sites that used to be industrial around that tracks line, the central core of the city, and building up from nothing. These are zones that are intended to add value to existing commercial sites and sort of a rescue operation for commercial in some instances. In some ways, that's why this is appropriate for this site in staff's mind, because the R.C. Willey building is now sitting vacant. R.C. Willey closed its doors earlier this year, I want to say. And we knew that was coming. That's when Boyer purchased the property. And we don't have another user for that kind of site. It is a very specific building that was built for that site. And we'll get into more of that as we go through the presentation more. Some other general plan considerations just to think about. The mapping is one of the things that we always look at when we consider requests to change the land use designation. But again, there are other objectives of the general plan that are supported by this application. To offer zoning and density and street improvements that offer direct incentives for areas that are targeted for revitalization. This would fit that strategy. Create neighborhood mixed-use zone designations and support with form-based development and design guidelines. Some of those are worked into these zones that are supported by this category. And support ranges of housing types and promote construction of smaller-scaled residential projects that can be integrated with current and future employment areas. These are all planned considerations that are supported by this request. Some considerations for the VMU zone. This is important. As we, just a little bit of background real quickly. I mentioned that these are different zones, and that's by design. When this was looked at a year ago, the Planning Commission recommended approval of a mixed-use zone here, but we didn't have these two zones in particular. As I went forward to City Council, there were concerns expressed about how much it may not fit well and how we might want to be able to do better things with density, look at lower densities, more parking requirements, because they are further from transit opportunities, and to consider more buffering for residential areas, because in our downtown core, you don't have a lot of single-family residential to worry about for buffering, and especially near the track stations, there weren't a lot of existing single families to worry about buffering, so we hadn't put a lot of buffering into those zones. We wanted to look at that carefully. That was the request from the city officials, and we, as a result of that, we went into a moratorium during the first part of the year, and over 6 months, we researched and wrote these zones, trying to be cognizant of those issues. Again, considering them the addition of residential to existing commercial. With that in mind, when we wrote these zones and drafted them and presented them to the city, we wrote them with kind of guideposts that would say along the way, as we considered properties for them, what might be considered appropriate in the property. The first of those considerations would be that they should be, as it says in number 1, existing commercial properties that are in and around those areas identified as nodes, commercial neighborhood nodes, in that general plan. This particular site, the old R.C. Willey building, is a city retail center, recognizing its position there on 9th East and Winchester as a busy intersection. So it meets that first test, that basic first test that needed to have been mapped in that 2017 plan. Second, it should be considered for properties or property that is at least 3 acres, this is 9.11 acres, and that are zoned or used for non-residential purposes. And these kind of seem obvious, but we wanted to make it clear in the zoning that this was not a zone that was intended to be implemented where there had been previously houses. We're not raising homes or taking down other sites like that, or even multifamily sites that exist and taking them down and redoing them. These are for non-residential properties to kind of help them maintain their commercial components and add value. So it does meet both of those tests, zoned or used for non-residential uses or purposes. And then again, we established 9 goals that should be applied, and we should make findings for at least 5 of these 9 goals on any property we consider to make sure that it's appropriate for this type of zoning. So in this case, we just wrote about or listed for the slides here the tests that were best matched by the application. The first one being that it should result in a high quality development of commercial properties. This is commercial property. The R.C. Willey building is gone. Like we said, we want to see more commercial still there. We don't want it, I don't want to say we're not interested in. We're more interested in mixed use on the site because it retains some commercial as opposed to entertaining a series of applications to rezone it to different multifamily zonings, which is another possibility that happens a lot. So this would result in better quality commercial property, retaining some of that commercial. The second test, retaining or rehabilitating commercial use of significant portions of the property. It'll have commercial requirements for Winchester and for 9th East. To increase local access to commercial services for in-the-project residents as well as for residents in the surrounding areas. The R.C. Willey is gone and there aren't services there anymore. We'd like to see those replaced for folks in that area. That helps us all with compact development, allows people to not use their vehicles to get to things that they want to use or purchase. To promote a greater variety of housing options within Murray neighborhoods. Again, that's a goal that you see crop up in the general plan over and over and over again, and we see this particular application being meeting that goal. To promote opportunities for life cycle housing and for moderate income households, different missing middle housing, townhomes, different attached housing styles, and multifamily housing will help with those goals. To provide increased walkability on the project site. We'll talk about it in a moment, but these kind of projects in this zone also require master site plan approvals. That lets us really dig down into the development process and make sure that there's walkability and connected pathways, et cetera, so we can have that happen. To create and contribute to a sense of place and community. If it's done right, through that master site plan process, that should be the case. And to result in improved conditions for buffering and transition between the project site and adjacent residential uses. And we're going to talk about more of those things in a moment as well. But we do find as staff that the project meets 8 of the 9 required findings. So it should be considered for that zoning. Some of the main differences between the VMU and the CD zone, and we'll talk about buffering that we just mentioned in a moment, but the first and most obvious difference is that the CD zone, the commercial zone, does not allow any kind of residential. It doesn't allow single-family homes or multifamily homes of any kind. The VMU zone, by contrast, will allow residential densities of up to 25 units per acre as a base density. There is an allowance to go higher than that. We created kind of a matrix as we were reviewing this with the city and went up to 35 units if they can provide affordable housing, 15% of the units. It gets more difficult to get to the higher densities, obviously. You provide additional amenities or you provide additional affordable housing guarantees to get the density higher. But it caps at 35 units per acre regardless. Excuse me. Parking, again, that's indicative of the fact that we wanted to look at reduced densities. The mixed-use zone that we looked at originally here a year ago, it was anticipating 40 to 50 units per acre. This is significantly less than that. It's more likely to be 25 or 30. That's more manageable. These are densities that we arrived at in working with the Public Works officials, working with Public Works Department, about what kind of densities would be manageable for our public services that are available, for sewer, for water, for power, et cetera. Parking, again, we felt like, as a staff, the parking requirements, they're very minimal in the transit-oriented development zones, the transit-oriented mixed-use zones. So the parking requirements were increased. For studio units, it's 1.25 spaces per unit. For residential 1-bedrooms, it's 1.5. For 2-bedroom residential, it's 2.15. And for 3-bedroom residentials, it's 2.65 spaces per dwelling unit. Just a fun side note, that's 0.15 spaces more than we require for multifamily of any other kind, the 2.65. You have a 3-bedroom apartment in the RM25 zone, it's 2.5 spaces. It's slightly higher in this, in recognition that 2.5 might be low.
Can we spend a minute here?
Sure.
Would you talk to me about the transit-oriented zones, what that parking is? Because a lot of times when these projects come forward, they use Fireclay as an example, saying, look how awful parking is going to be. Can you clarify that a little bit here, please?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the transit-oriented development zone, the TOD zone where Fireclay, what we call commonly Fireclay, it's a 1-to-1 parking ratio. Or it was when Fireclay was developed. We've actually just increased that slightly as well in the rewrites of the different mixed-use zones. And I don't have those numbers in my head, I'm sorry, but it was, at the time that was all developed, 1-to-1, regardless of the bedroom counts. One of the significant changes that we made was to look at the bedroom counts as opposed to the to just the unit numbers. Sorry. Well, yeah, that was the actual requirement. Is that what they provided? Oh, okay. So it was actually by development agreement, right? I think because okay. So I'm just flat wrong, not just that it's development agreement. So 0.75, very very low. We've sent in the MCCD in the downtown zone it's 1-to-1, and in the mixed use zone it was 1-to-1 as well, or a variation from 1 to 1.85 depending on how far you were from tracks. It was very complicated. We've backed off of all of that and gone to a bedroom count instead, trying to recognize that as time goes on, we may use less and less of that parking, but right now, the bedroom count is really what's going to drive the parking more. We worked with a transportation and parking consultant to develop those numbers, got some plans done and everything, so we're confident that those are good numbers to work with.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Just a couple more things. The Vmu Zone also does require project amenities. When you have up to 150 units, you have to provide 2 project amenities and 1 additional amenity for every 100 units. That's significant because as you look at increasing the residential density, if you want to go from 25 to 30, one of the things you have to do is provide a couple more outdoor amenities. This is in recognition of open space. I know that's a big concern with folks, especially, I know that people living adjacent to these areas worry about open space a lot. People living in them worry about open space probably even more because you don't have any of your own. You have to share with everybody. So if they're going to get additional density, we wanted to see additional open space and additional amenities. The minimum open space requirement is 15%, and as you can see, as you do amenities, you also increase your open space if you want to get to that 30 units per acre. So we see a better project, or we see affordable housing provided, or we don't see the additional density. Buffering was a main concern. There were no real buffer requirements in the mixed-use zone that was proposed previously, and there aren't a lot of buffering requirements in the CD zone. We do have a requirement for a 10-foot landscape buffer with a solid fence, solid wall. In the CD zone, we have that as well in this VMU proposed zone. The difference in between those 2 zones, the CD that's existing and the current zone that we're proposing, the VMU, is that beyond that, we have a couple of other considerations. Within that first 100 feet of that residential zoning boundary, you have to have that 10-foot buffer in the wall. But we also require under the site development standards that buffer not have any buildings directly adjacent to it. Something has to intervene, either a site access road, surface parking, some kind of amenity, maybe it's the trail, maybe it's play courts or something, but something intervenes between the first buildings on the project that are adjacent and the buffer itself. And then those first buildings that are adjacent, again, they can't be more than 8 units to a building. So there wouldn't be we wouldn't allow any giant apartment block buildings in that particular area directly adjacent to that buffer line. They'd have to be something smaller, 4-plexes or 8-plexes or townhomes.
And 35 feet is what you would see in an R18 zone for max height?
Yeah, 35 feet is allowed in the R18. 30 feet for commercial, you can go to 40, depending on conditional use permits, and you get additional height as you get further from the residential zone in the first 100 feet. We also require, or allow rather, only 35 feet for that first 100 feet in this VMU zone that's proposed. 35 feet, 2 stories, and no rooftop deck amenities. That's kind of been a concern for a lot of multifamily housing that you're familiar with as the commission. The exception for that being live-work units that have to use their bottom floor for commercial and don't get to count that commercial space for their parking. We would allow them, as long as they're at least 50 feet away, even though they're within that 100 feet, to be 3 stories or 40 feet, but still no rooftop amenities. And for commercial requirements, we allow live-work units for commercial requirements to fill that requirement that they have, but only up to 20% of the total requirement. So you wouldn't see a ton of live-work units on a project, generally speaking. Trying to see if I'm missing anything in there. Public improvements are different in this zoning, so you'd see good pedestrian access and pedestrian connectivity. We have those nice wide 7-foot sidewalks, 8-foot park strips that'll be required on the frontages of 9th East and Winchester Street. We are recommending that you forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for both the general plan amendment and for the zone map amendment. And I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
I just have 2.
Sure.
Under section 17.164.010 under purpose, it just talks about, and this is a clarification, I want to do this in the pre-meeting, but we ran out of time.
Yeah.
It says existing commercial properties in and around areas identified as commercial and neighborhood nodes.
Mm-hmm.
The neighborhood nodes I see on this map, are the commercial the city/retail center?
City/retail, et cetera.
Okay.
And it is confusing, and I apologize, but there are like 4 maps that identify all of these kinds of nodes, and some of them call them neighborhood nodes and commercial nodes straight out. Some of them call them retail and city centers. Some of them call them BRT villages. But they're all the same places over and over again with different kinds of names.
Great, thank you. And my second question. So we rezone this. There's an existing commercial property there that's not being used. What would explain to me how could the developer just go build an apartment building and use the existing space as the commercial space?
Yes and no. The existing building, if they were to find a way to adaptively reuse that,
Yes.
then we could do that. And we would encourage that. In this event, I got to tell you, it's not likely. The R.C. Willey building was built very much specifically for this property. But yes, we want to see buildings adaptively reused. For example, these zones were created to say if the Shopco building closes and there's a way to save that building, there's value in that building. If we can get another tenant there by adding residential to the site rather than tearing down the building and starting all the way over, great. That's more sustainable, et cetera. But it's not always going to be the case. There might be some where we can adaptively
So
reuse
my
the
question, I guess, then, if they could utilize that space as their commercial requirement, what guarantee is there that there would be a tenant in that building?
Oh, I see what you mean. So we would, that's a great question, and I should have I'm missing a slide, and so I'm gonna pretend it's there, and it's probably in my other slide deck for the next project. In this zone, 3 acres or more, and all projects that get rezoned for this have to be 3 acres or more. They require master site plan approval, and that means that they come to you with certain requirements, and I'm gonna just take them out of my code section because I don't have well, I know I got a slide. I'm just going to go forward. I'm going to steal Gary Howland's slide for just a second. Okay, so in the master site plan that's required for any development, so let's say you're hypothetical, they want to use this building. They come to us with, and they can't make the application until they bring it with a traffic impact study, a parking analysis, an adequate public utilities and facilities review that they've done with our public works staff and written up for us, and any other kind of public services review that we feel like might be appropriate, fire, schools, police, et cetera. That master site plan also it has a bunch of requirements. You have to do a central feature, you have to make sure that buildings are oriented to create open spaces, a lot of different things that we'll use to move things around on site and make things nice. But it also carries with it a requirement for a master site plan agreement, kind of a development agreement between the city and the developer. And that agreement is to cover everything that you have as a commission required under the master site plan approval and the phasing of the project. And the phasing is important because in a situation like that, our guarantee that it would be, that it would have a tenant would be something in the master site plan agreement, that development agreement that would say, you don't get permits for your commercial or for your residential components until we have at least so much of the square footage leased out in your adapted reusable building. That's how we guarantee it.
Yep, thank you.
If I was a property owner, so let's say we have an application come forward, property owner comes in with their master site agreement, they start to move forward on the project, they go belly up. What happens to that property and what happens to that master site plan?
Master site plan agreement governs that entire thing and the successors and assigns. So anybody who takes it over is subject to those same conditions. They don't get to build what's not in that agreement or in any order that's not in that agreement. If they want it to begin again, they come back to you for a new master site plan approval.
Okay. Will you give a little more insight specific to this site? What's gone on with power, sewer, police, fire, engineering?
Great. Yeah, thank you. So during that time that we were looking at all of these different zones, part of the reason we wanted to take that time out and look at them was concerns over how much capacity there was in public utilities outside of the city's core. Years ago, when the MCCD zones were adopted and the mixed-use zone was adopted, those areas of the city were looked at for capital improvements and making sure that we could cover 80 to 100 units per acre overall. And those improvements are either in or planned for. So we were confident that we could handle utilities problems or any utility concerns in those areas, but we didn't know in the other areas. So sewer was underway with the study already, water as well. So we have now looked at what capacities we have and how much density we could support overall in the likely areas that might see these requests for zone change. And the numbers that you see, 25 to 35 units per acre, are reflective of what we can handle. Those were arrived at with public utilities in tow and their studies that were going on.
So this isn't just willy-nilly. We've looked at this as a city and really thought about it.
We don't feel like we can handle more than the 35 units per acre in this area. Down in State Street, we can make some adjustments and handle up to 45. If we went beyond that very much with the properties that we have, we'd have issues. And we built in a certain margin of error there too. Just
And we looked at the entire city and all of the collective whole of all of these types of properties.
of these areas, of the areas that were likely to be changed, where we would consider applications for change. And the downtown and the other core areas of mixed use were already considered in previous capital improvements. So,
And Mr. Hall, was the school district included in those discussions to the extent that they could be?
yeah, Zach and I, he mentioned Dave the other day. We've talked to Dave during that process, and they know what kind of densities we're looking at. And again, we have those quarterly updates, and they're always kept aware of what kind of densities we could be looking at and how that might affect them. So.
And often with applicants, we involve the district in discussion.
Exactly. Right? And PUDs specifically, we make them get a letter from the school district. And we can do that with these as well. But they're always part of it. And in this particular case, if there were serious school concerns from I forget his last name all the time. He's just Dave to me, but we would, Roberts, thanks. We would have them talk with them as part of a review. If we were really concerned about it, that's what that fourth line is for. Public service reviews, we'd send them to the school district to do a review and make sure that where we're putting it is not a strain or whatever.
Jared, you touched on this in your presentation. Would you go into a little more depth about the reason why the staff and others feel that village mixed use is appropriate and is needed as a replacement for commercial with some of with basically what's happening in the economy? And
that's a great question, and I could probably talk for a couple of hours about it. But it's the trend for mixed use and how it has to do with a lot of different moving parts. Retailers, as the economy has changed, have shown less willingness to maintain or to go into new shopping centers that do not include residential on site. They do, just to be clear about retailers, they do their own research. They know, and you probably know this from your position too, they know exactly what they want for where they're going to put their businesses. And this method, especially in the West, these zones are more like Western mixed use than the downtown zones that we proposed. They're more likely to be horizontal mixed use, where the commercial is out front and the residential is in the back. But we feel like it's a good fit for more suburban areas because of that. It feels more like the traditional development that you've seen. But it also just allows us to, in addition to all of that, in addition to allowing developers and retailers to come back into a site that maybe would have gone dormant, as some of them do. In addition to that, it provides us an opportunity to add a scale that's more compatible, do all of those things that provide more efficiencies, like we were talking about with the other application briefly. It allows us to do missing middle housing that we don't have. It helps us with moderate income housing goals. It helps us with sustainability goals. These kind of units use less water, use less public facilities on the whole. They use less public tax base on the whole. To be maintained. And so we like the development pattern.
And buffering as well, right? Where we didn't have buffering between residential and commercial.
Well, and the buffering, the CD zone that we had didn't really have any buffering beyond just that 10-foot requirement. So,
how about I understand what Public Works can handle. How was the density, or how did you arrive at the density? I'm assuming that many concerns are going to be about density. So
yeah. So the density is arrived at by working with a couple of different things. By working with Public Works in terms of not just sewer and water. That's an easy one to do because there's a unit count you can do and say this many more toilets will generate this much more need and this much capacity, and where we have a place down the line we can make an improvement to the facilities, we can accommodate this much more. So there's that for water and sewer, et cetera. For traffic, it's the same kind of thing. It's looking at the master transportation plan. We were fortuitously in the process of doing that, so these were all included, these areas in that master transportation plan. Can we reasonably expect to accommodate with the facilities that we have and the improvements we can make to them in the next 10 to 15 years, accommodate this kind of growth? And the answer was yes.
So is there an option, or is there a thought? I think that many people will accept that commercial has changed and big box stores aren't as
not as viable.
You just look around; the world has changed. Is there a thought, or is there a methodology to have a zoning that would allow for the mixed use, but with less density?
Yeah, and well, yes and no. We talked about that in doing this review as well. So we talked to Public Works, we talked to city officials, and we also talked to developers. Mm-hmm. And the bottom line is that even at 30 units the acre, we're going to see significantly less structured parking, maybe none, because it won't. that density won't support that kind of cost expenditure. We still want to see really good development with good public facilities, with good design strategies and things, and we'll get those at 25 and that 30 units the acre. But below that, we simply won't see the interest in mixed-use development. For our requests will be for RM25 zoning, because you can do the same thing without the commercial requirement. And they're not gung-ho on the commercial capabilities of some of these sites. That's why they're going dormant. So without the mixed use, we risk losing the commercial capability of it, or having it sit dormant for years and years until it's finally burning or falling apart, as some of them have done in the past. But if we go much below, if we go below 25 units the acre, it just doesn't work at all. We're kind of at the bottom threshold, and maybe a little bit below it now, from the retailer standpoint.
And can you tell us a little bit more what that means by going to RM? That's apartments without any
Yeah, that would just be
less buffering, more apartments, no commercial?
Less buffering, more apartments, and no commercial component to it, and no design control from you all. So the point of mixed use is not just to create apartments and higher density. If we wanted to do that, we would just create high-density residential zones. We have in Murray an opportunity to do high-density zoning around the transit stations where it can really be accommodated and where it can really do some good, not just for us, but for the region. And we're not, I don't want to say it that way, we're not interested in just rezoning stuff to high-density residential, period. If it helps us to revitalize a commercial site, then we're interested. If it helps us to create community feel in an area, and I always have lots of pictures of things, and we hope we do these things. But if we can create these kinds of walkable neighborhoods, get the sustainability benefits, get the moderate income housing benefits, then we're interested. If it's just rezoning to high density residential without any of those other considerations, there's other ways to do that. There's better plans to have. We can look at residential infill ordinances that are very small scale, like we're talking about, that don't have necessarily commercial components, that would fit in a much more nuanced way in individual properties. We're not talking about that with this. We're talking about 3 acres and more, so it's a bigger site.
Can you address a lot of the things that have redeveloped on 9th East and Winchester have been rezoned as a residential neighborhood business? Yeah. And I know that was one of the comments, like, why not apply that to this, or why would that not apply?
Right, that's great. There's two reasons, and they're both related. The first is that the general plan says general commercial. And the general commercial has things about introducing residential components to commercial. And RNB, to an extent, would do that. But we didn't zone, or we didn't slate. I'm going to go back to see if I can see that here. We didn't slate these properties, or I say these properties, this property for that RNB. Oh, I'm in the wrong thing still. Sorry. We didn't slate this property for the RNB. As you can see in the general commercial, this is the RNB. As the RNB designation comes along, the neighborhood business, residential business, it's the zone that applies to residential business is the RNB zone that Marin is referencing. And it's very specifically written to sort of be a very light duty neighborhood business zone that has low impacts, and it's empty by 6, and you don't even need to worry about buffering necessarily, because your height is limited to 20 feet, I think, and 30 with a conditional use permit, and design considerations to make it seem residential, et cetera. Seems like a natural fit, right? Just the simplest way to explain it is to look at the depth of those properties on 9th East and their adjacency to residential, and then look at this block of properties. It was the R.C. Willey side. It's over 9.5. No, not over 9.5 acres, but over 9 acres. And the depth is too much for residential neighborhood business. It wouldn't apply well there. We don't allow any buildings that are of great mass in the RNB zone. So would we create a parking lot, a series of parking lots with small dental offices or something? I'm not sure, but it's not as good a fit.
Because I guess my understanding of these is as these individual properties had turned over, it was like one property at a time, not
very
a whole,
small scale.
Yeah, not a whole. Yeah.
The RNB zone, in short, is designed to handle very small properties turning over one at a time. In fact, we didn't rezone any of them RNB until people came in and wanted to convert them. And it actually promotes converting the existing home rather than, it's just a different animal, and it's not really applicable to something that's 9 acres like this.
Okay.
That's a great question, though. I appreciate it.
This may not be the best time. I'm going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
In the pre-meeting, we talked a little bit about for overall density in the city, we talked about the Galleria development that's mentioned in the transportation plan.
Yeah.
And how that has been changed or how the zoning will change the density there.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about that for a second?
Sure. No, there's no bad times. It's good. So the Galleria property is in the mixed use zone, what we call the Murray Central mixed use zone now, and we created a west sub-district that limited the density to 40 units per acre, period. So during the beginnings of the master transportation plan, when we were first letting the the consultant know about what kind of densities to expect, that area was at, I believe, at 80 units per acre. And that was a good example of something that just did not, that property didn't really fit to support that kind of density. So we chopped that one in half, essentially. And then at this point, too, it looks like we don't have an application, so we don't know what's going on there other than what they're talking about, and we're still looking at concepts and not even really looking at concepts yet. So I don't really know how to speak to it other than that. I think the school's staying, and so it'll reduce that further.
I think the point I was getting at is the density that was listed on the transportation plan is going to be much, much lower.
Yeah.
And it also included the 48 South development.
The 4,800 lofts that we just approved,
yes.
it included those numbers. So it's hard with properties that saying this much density is going to come because of this property, and the zoning is kind of a moving target anyway, because it depends on the design, and we're looking at ranges of densities. And in that case, it was happening at the same time that we were considering really dialing the density back on that particular property. Yeah, it's good point. I can't remember which slide deck I'm in now, so I'm going to go forward a couple.
You're in the right one.
Am I in the right one? Okay. Thank you. All right, any other questions for staff at this point?
Okay, Jared, I just want to ask, I know there were some emails that were submitted. Would we like to read those in first at the public comment, or should we have public comment first?
We should probably open public comment and then have...
And then read, yeah.
I'm
That's what I'm
dying
just saying.
first, so Susan and Zach had graciously agreed to read the comments in, if you want to start that way.
Oh, yeah. Forgot we hadn't even got to that part yet.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah, sorry.
Okay. We'll have the applicant come forward if they're in the other room.
Come out of the overflow.
Yeah.
chamber, Spencer.
Thanks so much for being here. If you would just state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Spencer Moffett with the Boyer Company, 101 South, 200 East, Salt Lake City, Utah, 84111. We're obviously here to listen and to answer questions. We think staff's done a great job, presenting this information. Jared provided some context as to, our involvement in the property. As he mentioned, we purchased the property last year. As a side note, the Boyer Company, I believe our first development almost 50 years ago was in Murray. We have long had an interest in Murray and have a long-standing relationship with this municipality, and it's been a great place for us. We're a local developer. We're constantly looking for opportunities that we can attach our name to, and we're not someone who's going to disappear. This is something that is very important to us, this particular project. So it's an exciting opportunity. That said, we came here last year seeking a rezone to the mixed use zone. We were excited at the prospect of 40 to 50 units per acre. We quickly learned from the feedback that was given that density was too high. I think we heard some other things from the residents at the Planning Commission meeting regarding buffers, heights of buildings, and parking, all of those issues that Jared had talked about. We listened to those, and when the moratorium came, not that we ever support or in favor of a moratorium, but I thought that was, as a development company, we thought that was a good idea. Let's figure out what works for the property. Generally, we seek to provide feedback when there is a moratorium and a new zone being written. We had limited conversations. I've got to give credit to staff. I think they stepped back and took that feedback and looked at it and said, hey, how can we best address some of these concerns while still promoting the development of the property in line with the general plan. So when we saw this new zone, and I probably shouldn't say this as a developer, but it does a good job protecting some of those interests, the buffers, the parking, the height, and the density. I think these are things, in a perfect world, would we select these? No, but I think we can live with these, and I think it, paints us into a corner as far as what we can do on the site, and makes us, think long and hard about some of these units. Just as an example, initially we were looking at 350 to 400 units. At this point, we're down in the 2 to 240 range. So our density is almost half. We're planning to put most of the density with this zone out front on Winchester and 9th East, and leave open space in the back. So that just gives you some context as to how we're responding to this VMU zone. So Credit to staff for coming up with it. We don't love it, but we think we can live with it, and I think it addresses some of the concerns that we heard. I know no one's ever going to be entirely happy. Development is not fun. We attend these meetings. I attend them as a resident as well. Development is hard and it's tricky, and we're sensitive to that, and we wish we could have everyone walk out of here happy, but that's a challenge. But we will do our best to listen and to implement some of those comments and concerns and come up with a development that collectively we can be proud of as a developer, as a community, and I think as a city. So that's a long-winded answer and an introduction, but we're happy to listen and answer questions.
Great. Thanks for being here. Okay, then I will open the public comment portion of this meeting. And I would just like to remind you that when you come up to the podium that you only have a limited time to speak, and especially that if your concerns have been addressed, please offer new information when you say your public comment. And if somebody has said a concern or something, please let's not rehash and relist the same concerns over and over. And then we will address your questions or concerns with the applicant or with staff when we close the public comment period. So we'll start with our emails, and then I have two people that I will call up that have filled out the paper. So yeah, we can do the emails first.
Okay, perfect. So this one is, it's actually kind of unique. It's different. It's an audio recording that was emailed in. It was by Elizabeth Lara. She says, "Hello, to whom it may concern. Here is my opinion and point of view as a member of Murray City. I hope for my questions and statements to be acknowledged in a public hearing. Thank you." So I'm going to load this up real quick. I apologize.
Hi, my name is Liz, and I reside in Murray. Currently, I'm a U of U chemical engineering major. And I was approached yesterday by a woman who explained to me her concern over a lower income community moving near us. I have a problem with that. Her concerns included more crime being committed, our safety being threatened, us being under attack basically by these lower income families. And lower income is synonymous with people of color. And that is historically and systematically correct. It basically is redlining what people are attempting to do to steer away these lower income minorities who yearn for the normalcy and the stability that every day we have the luxury of living in. Of course, we have clean neighborhoods and such low crime and whatnot. But that being said, the thought of a lower income people of color community intruding in our bubble of white is threatening towards people, and that is the exact reason why diversity is important, why having lower income
We can't hear the
of
recording,
color
please.
introduced to these areas of higher upper middle class white suburbs. And that is the way we eliminate this discrimination issue, this fear of crime being associated with people of color. And instead of attacking that point, you can actually maybe do something to help those communities, to really look within yourself and see, why are they committing these actions? Do they not have enough food? Do they not have enough education? And we can really look within ourselves and see humanity and humanize these people who are people just with a lower income. That's what it is, lower income. It's not anything to do with crime being brought to us. Thank you for your time, and I really hope you really look within yourself and see why you think certain things and why your opinions are your opinions.
Zach, I just want to let the people here know that we have not been timing the emailed comments at 3 minutes. We've just been reading them into the record.
Right.
And so that's why I didn't intervene.
I will say that that was exactly
Oh.
we made sure that was an
Okay,
exactly 3 minute long thing.
Okay. But that's why
But yes.
that's why I wasn't timing it, because on emailed comments we don't run the timer. Or should
Okay.
I not told them that?
Well, I will move on to the next one. I have a total of 4, more than 4. I have 4 written, and then I have a few more emails that have come in since. So this is from Sonia DeVore. Says, I am against rezoning the area around the Best Buy in Murray and R.C. Willey. Though we do need housing for so many people, I would like to be very clear about the concerns surrounding yet another high-rise apartment building in Murray. Traffic, the developer would have us believe that people in these units will use public transportation and that traffic won't be as big an issue as we think. In one of the studies for the Galleria project, the recommendation is to make Murray Boulevard a 5-lane road, kind of ironic since you would have to demolish some multifamily housing to accomplish this. Granted, it is a much bigger project at the Galleria than the proposal at Best Buy, but traffic will be increased. Look at the traffic snarls we have now in the area. If we are going to need to improve this area with new roads, let's get that done first. But building better roads that carry more people brings its own issues of degradation of our air quality even more. Crime, more people, more crime, just a fact. Does Murray have the resources to hire more officers, buy more patrol cars? I would like some input from the Murray Police Department as to how they feel about all this dense housing. I live in a neighborhood very near the new Murray Crossing, as well as Hunter's Woods and the Clover Creek Apartments. I have lived in this neighborhood for 25 years, and since the buildup of the new rentals across from Hunter's Woods and Murray Crossing, etc., there have most definitely been an increase in petty crime. Schools. The developer of the Best Buy project would have you believe that most of the residents will be surgeons and work from home professionals. I would like to know if this project will have any kids of subsidies such as Section 8 or Section 429. The programs appeal a great deal to families who have children who go to school. A transient population brings additional challenges for teachers. My grandchildren went to Parkside for many years. And of course, just the additional class size is a challenge. Are we ready for that? We will need more teachers, more buildings. Aesthetics. To be realistic, growth and change is inevitable. We will never have that small town feel again, but we can have development that is inviting, pleasant, and that honors Murray's rich history and heritage. Many of these new developments around town bring to mind some of the post-war buildings I have seen in East Germany, concrete. Let's not look like every other city and give up everything that has made Murray unique. Change and progress are inevitable, but we need to be smart about it. It's ready, set, fire. Let's make sure we keep the right order. Sincerely, Sonia DeVore. Okay, this one is from Aaron and Stephanie Turner. Hello, as a longtime resident of the area, we would like to voice our concerns about having high-density, low-income housing that is being proposed at the R.C. Willey property. This project sounds familiar to the one off of 45th West of State. Unfortunately, crime seems to have spiked in that area. Has this been considered? Why does the housing need to be low income? Traffic is already a problem. This would make unbearable. Thank you for considering these points, Aaron and Stephanie Turner. Next is from Crystal McMillan. Please do not allow a large apartment complex to be built on the old R.C. Willey property. It will greatly impact the adjacent neighborhood. Consider zoning for condos or townhomes. Okay, this one is from Janelle Klingler. To whom it may concern, I am concerned about all of the apartment development in Murray. I worry about overuse of things like water, transportation, traffic, education, and first responder resources. Have these been considered? I know there is a lot of pressure on cities along the Wasatch Front to include more housing, but we need to ensure we're doing it wisely. Sincerely, Janelle Klingler. Okay, and there... Sorry, I have... Okay. 2 emails. This is from Julie Schreck. To whom it may concern, I was recently made aware that Murray City is currently considering rezoning the RC Willie area to mixed use. This would allow the developer to build 3 to 4 story buildings with several hundred apartments for lower income students and families. I have to say I'm extremely disappointed to hear this, as I live at 6428 South Golden Chain Street. I have personally experienced a significant amount of crime that appears to be propagated by both the Crystal Inn and the James Point apartments along Winchester. We recently had to put in an alarm as we have a stranger in our backyard who attempted to gain access to our home with our walkout basement. To add even more apartments in a highly congested area simply means that the risk of potential crime will likely increase. To put this frankly, I feel that Murray City often puts the needs of business over the needs of actual homeowners. There are many properties like this in the works, and a development like this would be ideally suited for the sports mall area where there are already limited residences. I sincerely hope this motion doesn't pass. If it does, I think most folks in our neighborhood will look to move. We personally will look to move ourselves, heartbreaking because we absolutely love our neighbors and neighborhood. I would personally vote for whatever mayor can support growth that doesn't harm homeowners. Sincerely, Julie Schreck. This last one, I will caveat that we are required to read this verbatim from this standpoint. So I'll just say that. So I apologize in advance for language. This is absolutely the worst idea I have ever heard. If this comes into our quiet neighborhood, you will lose several good families. I will do whatever it takes to stop this from coming to our quiet neighborhood. We already have enough trouble with the hotels around us. Bringing this in will turn this neighborhood into a ghost town. I will chain myself to the equipment if I need to. I have grown up in this quiet neighborhood and I will fight to the end, so take your shit somewhere else. We don't want it. Try if you dare, you stupid idiots. And that's by Amy Ballard. And that's all I have.
Okay, great. I have some paperwork for Tim Richardson.
Hi, Tim Richardson, 772 East Labor Avenue. Been in Murray 47 of my 54 years, grew up in it. Just wanted to express my concerns, and I think Julie Schreck had a really good email, and I would probably echo a lot of those same sentiments. I appreciate the staff and the presentation because that did address a lot of concerns with drainage, parking, those types of things. I do kind of disagree on some of those little statistics, but just watching kind of James Point, I see that parking space is limited, and I see them kind of grow out on 725 East, and there just simply isn't enough. And I know that it sounded like they've bulked it up a little bit more, but I guarantee it will not be enough because there's literally 2 and 3 cars per each unit there, and they're going to go somewhere. I'm nervous about the traffic patterns, the intersection of 725 and Winchester. That already is a pretty, you probably know of all the metrics there, of all the crashes that are happening. I guarantee you put that many units in there, that one is going to be a problem there. So the major construction. I'll let Verl and them talk about the drainage problems that I guarantee that there is, and that's a pretty significant issue there. I wanted to focus on, just in my concerns, similar to what Julie said, is being, living here, grew up, you're going to affect a generational living situation. And it's probably in your same area in Murray, where nobody wants to live next to that many units or an apartment complex. I'm literally directly bordering that. So I obviously have a concern from that because I will be bordering that. I'm on the west side of that, in that dead end right there from RC Willie. That generational living that I mentioned, we're talking people like me. My mother lives 3 blocks from me. She's 95 years old. I moved back in because I absolutely love Murray. My wife is from Murray. Her parents live 1 block from me. There's so many people in that neighborhood right there that literally come back and live to be next to their parents as well as their siblings. And so it's probably the same way, I'm hoping, in your area of Murray, but it seems to be a unique area, and you're going to impact that generational living there, I guarantee. It will definitely impact my influence in staying. It'll definitely impact those, and I think that's what you're going to do if you let this high rise, if you let apartments, that many units go in. And I apologize to the Boyer Company because I know they have ROI and things of that nature, and I understand that. But just please, whatever you do, keep that in mind, because that's probably the most important thing, more than the crime to me, more than the traffic, more than the parking, more than those things, is that pattern. And just real quick, I still have a few seconds, I'm timing myself. which I was just playing tennis at the Southwood courts, and a guy from Michigan, I was playing him, and he just moved in, and he's in Draper. And he was like, this place is amazing. And I'm like, oh man, Murray is the most amazing place ever. There's people that I've known for 40 years of my life. I've grown up here. I moved away for 5 years. I came back, and this is the greatest. And during that time, it was like a parade. Hey, Tim, hey. And I'm like, oh, I've known them for 40 years. Knew Brian Feddersen for 15 years. Knew this guy. And he's like, this is the coolest place. I guarantee that will be affected if this kind of place goes in, because it'll affect people like me and the generational living coming back that want to be like in Murray, just like Julie recommended. Thank you.
Okay, and then I also have one for Gary Weston.
I am he, Gary Weston, and I live at 809 Southwood Drive, and I've been there for 52 years. My problem is my home is about 4 blocks away from the project. So under the ordinance, I didn't meet the 400 feet requirement, so I didn't get notice. I had to have somebody call me. 400 feet east of this project is just commercial property and one farm. Only one house would have received the notice. 400 feet south of the project is the Red Cross building, commercial. Nobody would have received the notice. 400 feet west of the project are 4 homes. Only 4 people would have received the notice. 400 feet my direction north of the project, there are about 20 homes that would have received the notice. So Murray City really needs to do something with regard to its ordinance of giving notice with regard to rezones. Now, I served where you do way back in 1987, and I didn't do anything about it then, so I'm more to blame than you are. So I wanted to bring it to your attention. The people who are there will have the same, I think, idea that I have, and our concern is what we want is responsible home ownership in the area. Responsible home ownership. We don't have any problem at all with tenants. I've got a daughter that's a tenant and grandchildren are tenants. They're great, wonderful people. Tenants are. These good people that have given us the recorded information. They didn't mean it quite that way. But there's a difference between a tenant who's here today, gone tomorrow, and acquires no vested interest in either the area, the neighborhood, or the community. Homeowners necessarily do that. 250 potential units would go in here for 10 acres, on almost 10 acres and 25 units an acre. Nobody said anything at all about what to do with regard to condominiums. Or immediately west of this project is the Brad Reynolds 2-home project, which is a wonderful thing down there. That could work also. The problem is that we clearly need large apartment buildings in our community. But when we put them in, we've in the past, like we did down on Fireclay, we bounded them with commercial and industrial areas. But to put them in a commercial or a residential area where we are, where it's everything that Tim Richardson is telling you, people have been there forever, like I have, it changes. We want people there who are there because they want to be there, because they own property there. They need to maintain it, protect it, respect it, and expect that of the owners around them. That's what home ownership is. Now, this developer wants to make money off this project and needs to make money off this project, but very importantly, I wasn't here, but from what I've heard, they were here before you good people. And one of the projects they had is what they wanted to do was going to give rise to them being able to put in a very high...
Oh, sir, your time is up.
A high count project. The only reason they want the village project now is they think they can persuade you therefore that moving down from what they wanted before to 25 per acre is acceptable. I respectfully submit it's not, but thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, if you did not fill out a paper and would like to make a comment, will you please fill one out after your comment? You can come out and please state your name and address for the record.
Dwight Packard, 815 East Silver Shadow Drive. 64 years old, 64-year resident of the area we're talking about. I don't know why Spencer couldn't bring a proposal before you under the current zoning. Why can't he? He can. I do not see the need to approve a zoning change at this time. And I realize staff has spent a lot of time to try and paint with a broad brush something that might work, but it might not. I suppose if we could cherry pick this and that, we could put together a project that would work for both Boyer and for the neighborhood. But if we pass the zoning now, it ties our hands. There's high-rise apartments mentioned as permitted uses, and the dreaded H word, hotel. That's a permitted use. That would create a secession of our neighborhood from Murray. And I'm probably not kidding. You don't need to pass it. You can just turn it down, and Boyer can bring their proposed project to you, and we can consider it at that time. Thank you.
Hi, Janice Strobel. So first, I want to thank you guys because you guys are getting so many projects thrown at you right now. Staff is doing an amazing job, and what you're going to do in the next bit is going to make such a difference in what happens for Murray in our future. So, you know what? You got a big job, and I really appreciate that you do as much as all you do, because I know that you guys are reading through your stuff and you're diligently working on this. So, just a couple of things. I do want to say tonight you're getting 2 new mixed-use zones brought before you. So, this is brand new territory. You are setting precedents for what's going to happen now for the future of Murray with these 2 new mixed-use zones. And so I have to go, my notes are all over the place. What I want to say is what got submitted to you about these new mixed-use zones, I submit is not sufficient for being able to say that they actually meet the goals or are close enough to the goals to go ahead and approve changing it to that zoning. Yes, you're just submitting your recommendation, and then it is the council that does make the change. But I just, by answering how they're going to meet those 9 goals, and they only have to choose, I think it's 5 of the 9, and just write a little narrative about how their project is meeting that goal. It needs, my point is that these goals need more detail. They need like illustration and examples to explain how they will specifically meet those goals before you go about changing it to that zoning. I just think the narrative is not adequate for changing a zoning. And so, okay, that's pretty much all my notes. I do want to say one last thing about mixed use. So far, the mixed use that's been built in our city, what we've done with the portion that's the mixed use portion, which is the commercial, we've been building for vacancy. We do not have those portions of the mixed use being filled. They're new buildings, but they're vacant on the bottom. So are we having success? I know that these are new mixed use, and I think they have taken a lot of consideration into what was maybe some of the issues with the previous mixed use. But I did have a conversation with Jared, and he did tell me that, it takes a few years for mixed use to really get implemented well into a community. He gave me a number of 25 years. So we're talking a whole generation before these mixed uses really are maybe functioning, maybe not, to their full capacity. Is that really what's going to work for our city right now with the demands that there are for?
Thank you. That is
using
your
the
time.
space? Thanks, Maren.
So
Take
much.
care.
Do I just turn the beeper on? So just maybe. Do you want to turn the sound on? So just maybe. Okay. I don't know. If that'll work.
Burl Greenhall, 771 East Labrum Avenue, Murray, Utah, 84107. First of all, I was amazed. My wife sent an email and it didn't get read. I don't know why.
If it was an email included in our packet, we read all those emails. All those emails were sent to us before tonight's meeting. So we
You read it ahead of time?
Yes, it was included in our packet. We read those emails.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, great. First of all, I beg to differ with the conclusion that staff made on all the utilities being sufficient. We had someone, and I actually think it was the Public Works Director who came and met as a neighborhood at the end of Labrum. We actually have a thing that happens every year. We call it Lake Labrum. At the very end of the street, it becomes a lake. And Public Works admitted to us that the storm drain was not sufficient for this area. When we talked to Mayor Snar some time ago, he indicated it would be several $millions to be able to put in a new storm drain, and the city did not have the budget. So somewhere the communication that there is sufficient utilities for that area got construed, because Public Works admits that it is not sufficient for that area, and anything that we put in there is going to be an impact. I'm not the only one, but I can only speak for my lot. We've got flooded several times, and we've been told that in the last 5 years there have been new 100-year storm calculations made. So it's only going to get worse. Second thing, Boyer is a very smart company. I suspect strongly, before they agreed to make the sale, that it was conditioned upon a rezone. I'm really surprised that they haven't really addressed other opportunities that could happen in there and leave it commercial. We haven't even explored any of the other commercial things. They just say nobody wants a big box. There are tons of other commercial developments that could be put in there that would enhance the area instead of distract from the area that multi-use would allow. Because multi-units, whether it's village or multi-units, it still means that there's going to be multiple units going in there that are going to be impacting our neighborhood. I strongly, strongly hope that you will reject this. Allow Boyer to present something that looks to us. We haven't even seen what they could do, and we have no clue of what they were willing to do. Make them come to the table and say, this is what we're proposing before you rezone. If you rezone, we don't have an impact. We don't have an impact. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Allie Anderson. I'm 808 East Briar Meadow Avenue. I'm somebody that Tim said, I was born and raised here. I moved back and I live 7 houses from my parents. I love Murray. I'm raising my kids. A few concerns that I have as a mom is I have kids that go to Longview Elementary. If a multi-use is put in here and 200 units, there's 2 kids per unit, that's a lot of kids Longview can't handle. We are already stuffed as it is. Classroom sizes. My son was in a 3rd grade class that had 35 kids. We had 2 teachers. We don't have the teachers. We don't have the money to hire new teachers. The building can't handle that. Traffic, obviously. Studio 6 and Crystal Inn are huge crime places. We have literally chased people out of our yard and have followed them to Studio 6 and to Crystal Inn. And my concern is if you put a business there, that's just going to be a breeding ground for the people that are already hitting our neighborhoods. And I'm saying like weekly neighborhood, we're getting hit all of the time. Myself and I've been here 5 years back and I've been hit over a dozen times. That is a major concern. Cops, we're shorthanded cops. We've talked to the people that can't come when we're getting broken into, and there's not enough cops. So I strongly urge you to not approve it tonight. Give us more information. And like Brill said, there's more options out there. So please take that into consideration.
Hi, my name is Dale Simper. I live at 6417 South, 725 East. I've lived in Murray all of my life except for 10 years. I've lived at this location for 27 years. And as I look out in the audience here, most of these people are my neighbors, and they're here concerned about this project, and really all of them, I believe, oppose it. I want to make 4 points, and I'll make them quickly. I'm concerned about low-income housing, low-income, high-density housing that equals higher crime. Has nothing to do with race, unlike our enlightened recording. Has nothing to do with it. We've got crime in the neighborhood now, like Ali said. Lots of our homes are being hit by transients that come through. High-density housing is going to contribute to that. And that's my neighborhood. Number 2, I was concerned initially that high-rise apartments can lead to voyeurism, although it was addressed in the plan that the higher ones would be farther away from the residents. Even still, someone with binoculars can look in on houses there. I know every single family whose home is adjacent to that lot, and I know every one of them are extremely concerned about that. Many are considering moving should a high-density plan be approved there. Number 3, we've seen it over and over again, and we're seeing it still, is that today's fancy high-density projects with shining and sparkly exteriors are tomorrow's ghettos. And that's a ghetto in my neighborhood that I don't want there, and these folks don't either. Personally, I would prefer homes in there. What was brought up was a similar project just west on Winchester, where there are twin homes going in, and they all border a busy street. That's certainly an option there, and one that the neighborhood would prefer. So thank you for your time, and thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments about this?
Hello, my name is Jody Holman. I am also a resident that has lived here my whole life. In fact, after I got married, I chose to, again, purchase a home in Murray, and I now have 2 homes in Murray. I live on 746 East Litson Circle, which is just off an adjacent street to Winchester. One of my concerns that hasn't been addressed today is a lot of times that 725 is used as an alternate route for 6400 or for Winchester or for 9th East if there's traffic problems. There are already super bad traffic violations as people speed up that road. It's a 25-mile-per-hour road, and yet people zoom down there. I have 2 young kids that I'm fearful anytime I take them out for a walk or whatnot that they will, they'll be hit. And I know that's a fear for a lot of people with young kids in the neighborhood. I know that's an indirect road, but because of the impact that people would have as they go to Longview for a school, or also to the churches that are on that road, or to the park, it will increase the traffic on that road a lot. And as people have said, there's no cops out there to look at that. And so I just really have a concern above and beyond what's already been stated that there's going to be increased traffic to that road that's already having major problems that are a big safety concern to me and my family. Thank you.
My name is Davis Hansen. I live at 736 Labrum Avenue on the same street as the Richardsons. And I don't have anything new to add. I just want it in the public record that I am adamantly against this rezoning. Our hands are tied. The same thing happened to the lot behind us. Luckily, it turned out okay for the most part, but there were still some issues. So I don't think we know enough to really make this decision. And if it is made, it's going to affect the entire neighborhood. Probably for the negatively. So I'm against it. Let's recommend for a denial. It shouldn't go through. Not yet.
I would have to follow somebody tall. I'm John Nelson. I live on 812
Silver Shadows, like Tim, like a bunch of others, I've lived in this neighborhood my entire life other than just 2 years. The only concern I want to bring up is I was trying to remember all their names, and I would give them all to you on the public record. It's all the kids that live on my street. Silver Shadows, like Jody mentioned, is very similar to 725. I beg you to come up my street between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m., head east and try and turn out onto 9th East. You cannot get out because the traffic already is backed up. People choose to dive down our street and they fly down our street. And I wish I could put on the record all the kids on my street because I'm scared to death for their safety. And the amount of traffic that 250 units or 250 units is going to bring to my street's a concern. I don't want to move. I am adamantly opposed to any apartments in my backyard. My backyard is R.C. Willey's parking lot. We've had the perfect neighbor for 26 years. They haven't made a peep other than kids going in there and doing Brodies once in a while. And there isn't one man in here that didn't do that in R.C. Willey's parking lot. I'll go on the record for saying that. I'm opposed to any change. I don't know why. Boyer makes beautiful buildings. I know they could come up with something else other than apartments.
Thank you. At this time, I just want to check in with the commission. Are you guys okay to keep going? Would you like to take a break?
I'm good through public comment. I want a break after public comment.
Okay. All right.
Before we do number 8.
Okay.
Colleen Fisher. I live at 740 East Labrum Avenue. I've been there 45 years. And like Davis, I want to go on the record that I'm opposed, and I hope you don't grant the zoning change tonight. When the James Point Apartments were proposed many years ago, we lived there, and they came and told us that it was going to be beautiful, that it was just wonderful. It was only going to be an adult community. This is how they approached the neighborhood. It was only going to be adult community. Well, many years later, you see what it is. I live right close, and there is crime in the apartments. And I just don't think we need any more of that, and so I want to go on record that I'm opposed to the zoning change.
So I'm not a Murray native. My family moved here 15 years ago, and it was not our
Will you just state your name and address?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Jennifer Horn, 752 East Silver Shadows Drive. And it was not our master plan. In fact, our plan was to live here 6 months and move. We just had to be out of our one home and fell into this home. But we fell in love with Murray, and we have been here for 15 years. And if you look at other projects on the master plan, in the last 5 years, the changes that have been happening in our area have not been conducive with what the master plan is. So when I see or hear arguments for this, that it's the master plan for this to be what it is, I know that we can make it something that isn't the master plan because it has been done in the last 5 years. They've referenced the townhome project that's just west of us. We love that, and it's very successful for the Reynolds I hate public speaking company, but this is very important to me. I live on Silver Shadows. They did bring up the traffic thing. That is not new, and we're not just bringing it up because of this Boyer proposal. I actually had been speaking to Brett Hills about it over a year and a half ago, about if we could dead end some streets, about cutting down the drug deals. Last October, I woke up to somebody breaking in our back door who had just been released from prison, and he was arrested at the Crystal Meth Inn, is what the police officers called it when they came to give me the update. And they said between the Crystal Meth Inn and the Studio 6 apartment, they could have a full-time job. So we're already fighting that, but we love our neighborhood and we're doing what we can for our kids to keep it safe. And this, I just feel, is another thing we would have to be fighting. And then also I work at Murray High School. I am the registrar and the remediation graduation specialist. The remediation graduation specialist was made 3 years ago. I helped students graduate who are behind on credits. And in all the meetings I've been to, they say that the reason my job was created was because of the rezoning in Murray and the demographics that we are changing in Murray. So I feel like you guys have the responsibility of deciding what kind of city you want and voting for that. And just be thinking of that. Thank you.
That's inappropriate. Please don't, we're not clapping for other people's comments. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Clark Bullen, and I live in District 3, 5051 Treetop. There are two projects requesting a zoning change from commercial to high-density residential mixed use today. I live near the second one considered tonight, but I believe the concerns are the same for both and should be considered the same way. I have nothing against these projects specifically since we do not know very many final details about them. All we know is what is allowed under the zoning. We do know that R.C. Willey at 9.11 acres could build up to 318 units. And we know that the 53rd at 13, the Best Buy property with 13.22 acres could build up to 595 units. Before we approve up to 913 more new units in Murray, we need to consider all of the density that's currently being built and is potentially going to be built based on zoning that is already approved. Kmart property, the 421 apartments are going in there. Carnegie Library, historic Carnegie Library, 130 apartments are going in there with only 137 parking spaces, might I add. We just heard that the Galleria property is going to have less zoning, but even if you cut it in half, that's up to 1,300 units. The 4,800 South Lofts were just approved for 371 units. Bonneview, 350 units. 48th and State, Block 1, that was highly contentious, is proposed 262 units. That's at least 2,500 new apartments coming in a very short period of time. The next few years make a huge difference, and I believe we should take a step back as Murray City, and we should await to approve any more higher density until we've had an opportunity to do a thorough, closer look as a citywide evaluation of how these increases in density affect all of our resources that were mentioned tonight, like traffic, crime rate, one of the highest crime rates in the state, and per the nation for our size. Schools, water supply, our infrastructure, and other resources. Most of the nearby homes here were purchased with a specific commercial zoning in mind when they were bought, and this will be a bait and switch to them. The increases should be looked at in aggregate and not in a vacuum. One traffic study for just this one area doesn't consider all of the other density coming in. The general plan zoning should be followed or officially revised. It was done in 2017, 5 years later, in an unprecedented time for a desire and a demand for higher density would not be out of the question. We could do an official revision and look at it all as a whole. Approving these one-off projects will set a precedent tonight of changing from commercial to high-density zoning, and there's other potential sites, as you know, like Shopko, Sports Mall, the current City Hall where we sit, to name a few. We need to control this growth or it will control us. I request that the Planning Commission deny these applications and that the applicants can reapply after the city has considered all of this density increase as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Is there any?
My phone's rude.
Are there any other comments?
I can't make it stop. There we go.
My name is Shauna Nelson, and I live on 812 East Silver Shadows Drive. So my backyard will look into whatever is approved for this lot. We've been in that home for 22 years. We knew that it was commercial when we moved in. Like my husband said, it's been a perfect neighbor. This is our third home, and we've had not so good residential neighbors behind us before, so we have appreciated the commercial aspect of it. My concern is Murray's image. Murray has changed a lot in the 22 years that we've been here, and they've changed a ton in the short area that we live in. The Crystal Inn, the I can't think of what it's called, the extended stay, the Studio 6, James Point. All of it is contributing to lots of different things in our area. We have had cars stolen. We've had cars broken into, windows smashed. We've had bikes stolen. Things have been rummaged through more than a dozen times. And just last month, we had some random lady sitting on our front porch and didn't know where she was or what she was doing. So there's a lot of riffraff that comes in because of what's already existing. If you add any additional low-income housing, it shouldn't be an incentive to get better commercial interests to have low-income housing. Everything that you guys do is the choices you make are consequences for us. And I would beg of you to please leave this commercial and let us just have something else. They can do something else that's commercial, but I strongly object to this. And I would tell the Boyer Company that this would be a perfect lot for a second Murray cemetery, and we would be happy to buy 20 lots right off the bat, top price. So thank you.
Are there any further comments? Okay, seeing none, then I will close the public comment portion, and we can just address some of these concerns with staff.
So excuse me, I'll do my best to go back through some of the things I heard by themes or in some ways. It's always really encouraging to see to hear comments from Murray neighborhoods because they are really strong neighborhoods, and so I'm going to get that out of the way right at the get-go. It's really encouraging to see the neighborhoods that Murray has and Murray creates, and we hear this from you all, and we had a lot of good conversations when the Advocates Building was going in. The previous zone change application last year. They're good, thoughtful comments, and I want to try to address them the best I can. I'll do what I can. To just go off the bat, there's a lot of comments about crime, so I'm going to take them all in one shot as best I can. I understand the concern. I'm not sure that I can do anything about that or adequately address it. I do know there's a lot of belief that multifamily or density is correlated to crime. Some of it is just the fact that you're putting more people in one area, and there's not a preponderance of the people themselves to commit more crime, but there's just more people in a smaller area. So you see it more, right? And that's a natural kind of consequence. It does sound like we have a crime problem in the area based on the comments. I'm sure you're all talking to the police department about that and trying to increase patrols, and I would encourage that. A lot of other things about that I can't really speak to. It does sound like we have problems with the hotels. I will tell you candidly that hotels are a use that's allowed in the CD zone as well. So that's if the hotels are the concern. There was one comment about if it's a hotel, then it'll be a problem too. We do allow hotels in that zone. It's already there. I'm not sure it's a great site for a hotel. That might be part of the problem with the hotel crime that we have. I don't know. Can't really address that. Some concerns about parking. I think we can talk about. I think it's important to remember that James Point. I'm hearing that there are some problems with parking, and that's true. You see that with apartments that don't have a lot of access to transit. We tried to look at these zones as recognizing that there isn't good access to really high volume transit opportunities. There's some bus routes and things, but really there's an understanding that there'll be a lot of vehicle use associated with these residential uses, at least for the time being. And the parking numbers do take that into account. They were developed in conjunction with a parking consultant. One thing that's different between James Point, for example, or any other apartment complex, and a mixed use development, as we talked about before, why mixed use in this area instead, is that you get the benefits of joint shared parking between that use and the residential and commercial uses. So for example, when it's RC Willey, the parking lot is for RC Willey. So James Point, people can't park in that parking lot. But the shared parking between the commercial ventures that go into a mixed use project like one that would be proposed here, you get some benefit from that shared parking when they're not using They're parking for their daytime hour businesses. The townhomes and apartments that are in a project like that have some overflow parking accounted for with visitors that are coming, et cetera. So it can absorb some of that and be a benefit in mixed use instead of regular apartments. Moderate income housing, I do want to make sure this is addressed because no one is proposing moderate income housing or affordable housing at the site right now. We do encourage it. That's a goal that the city has. It was strongly advocated by city council members, et cetera. We want to provide it as an incentive, but we did not want to demand it of the projects. But again, no one is proposing, and Boyer has not proposed to use affordable housing on here, so I can't speak to that. But it's not an affordable housing project per se. We don't know what will be there.
Just because you said that,
Yeah.
can you explain why we would entertain a zone change without a formal proposal before us? Could you help explain that?
Great. I'll skip forward to that one.
Yeah.
So we don't have an opportunity under our code to look at projects before we entertain the zone. So we can't have Boyer present to us what they would do if we were to give them the correct zoning or the zoning that would support it. And furthermore, even if we did and they proposed the project to us, and then we said, okay, that looks great, we'll give you the zoning, we're back at square one. There's nothing in our code that would tie them to the development that they showed us, and then we give them the zoning and they do something else. There's no way to address that under our current ordinances, and there's no really good way to address that ethically or legally under zoning, generally speaking. Zoning comes first, and that's
So it's
why
not unique to our city?
No, it's not. Not
Jared,
at all.
Also, could you mention, you'll say this better than me, but we will also review this project after the zone and have to approve the project if the zone is changed.
That's right. So if the zone is changed, there'd be another public hearing for the project. And it might take some time to get a project going. There's studies that have to be done. We talked about the studies that are required, the parking analysis and the traffic study, public services, facilities, et cetera. And yeah, it would be a master site plan approval. That's a very involved review for you all as the planning commission to do. And then it takes another step for that master site plan agreement that goes from the planning commission to the city council. So there's actually a city council component in any of these projects, not just the zoning. Normally, development projects or conditional use permits or they're a site plan approval or what have you, and those are approved by the planning commission and it's done. In these cases, there will be one final step that involves the city council after the planning commission has done their review and made their master site plan approval. So it'll be the city council's job to review that development agreement and make sure that it requires all the things that you required as a commission and does them in the right order. Yeah, does that address your question, Jake? I was just making sure.
Thank you. While it's not obligatory, and obviously we can't require it. We have seen examples where developers have taken that step recently, and in a what I would consider to be a neighborhood that had very strong concerns, and they took quite a bit of time and addressed those concerns. And really, some of the concerns that were mentioned here about privacy, they took the time to address those and to present a bit of a plan that helped to overcome some of those concerns, I believe, based upon the attendance of the meeting that we did recommend for approval that change.
I would agree. I would agree, and a lot of those same kind of concerns had or the way that they tried to address those concerns, and this was while we were writing the zones, informed how we tried to approach these buffering requirements.
So while it's not a requirement, perhaps it's a best practice.
Yeah. I would agree.
But you would to make a site plan?
We don't discourage it, but we don't require it, and it doesn't. I'm going to be frank and say it doesn't always go that well.
Yeah, we've seen it where they've come before us. They presented something in a project where they weren't tied to, the master development, the site development, and we think, oh, that's shiny, it's beautiful, let's do it, and then they come in and do something completely different. So that's a reality as well.
True, that's true. Trying to think if there was one other. There was a lot of discussion about. Well, not a lot, but there were some points about the transient nature of, or the more transient nature, at least, of rental dwellers, et cetera. And that's a problem that, of course, we sympathize with, and we'd love to see more ownership. We've discussed before as a commission, and I'll just put it out there for the record in this case too. We cannot, under zoning codes, under the Fair Housing Acts, we cannot require that housing be owner-occupied or owner-occupiable styles. That's not something we get to do. And just for the sake of argument, just to put this in your minds as you're looking at things going forward, the nature of commercial development is changing. The nature of residential development is changing, and the nature of the way people live their lives is changing. More and more and more people in this country are renting. That by fact, that's got to mean that eventually rental neighborhoods will become more like communities. And if we give them spaces that are carefully designed, that have open spaces to be in and places to recreate in and shops to go to and ways to know their neighbors and reasons to know their neighbors and reasons to stay. Frankly, a lot of them are not going to have choices that we always had. This is a larger discussion about the housing market, but people's choices about ownership are really limited at this point, and it doesn't show any signs of getting better. So I would look to rental housing as becoming more community friendly in the future. That's just my opinion as I look at it.
And Mr. Hall, I feel a little bit moved to say I, in the pre-meeting, brought up my desires to push for owner or long-term rent, and I've done that multiple times, and it's against the law. But we keep trying to find a way to address that concern. So.
If the market shifts and things change, of course, and but we're at the mercy of the federal government and the market in that case.
I want to play into the generational aspects of our city. Where are your grandchildren going to live? Because they can't afford to buy a home in your communities right now. I have a great job. My wife has a great job. We can barely afford to live in your neighborhood, and we live in your neighborhood. So we have fantastic jobs. Our children don't have those same opportunities. I have a daughter right now that's going to the U. She's going to be a public school teacher. You know where she's going to live? Not in Salt Lake Valley. That's where she's going to live, because that's the reality of where we are today.
And as much as I'm to irritate the staff, I keep pushing to see if there's any way we can make things long-term or owner-occupied. I lived in a hotel, and an apartment, and an apartment, and I think I was as good a citizen then as I am now.
And actually, so it wasn't part of the public comments, but I'll address it really quickly. So we have over 75% of the land in Murray developed as single-family homes. That's common throughout the valley. In 2000, the state of Utah got together and decided that if we kept doing that, we would build ourselves out of any ability to sustain anything we can do really quickly. This is the way we have to start thinking about development. It's the only sustainable way to develop. And it's not that we have a shortage of single-family homes necessarily. We have a shortage of dwelling units. The shortage of the ability to address that shortage with single-family homes is very limited, and it costs us all in infrastructure, and it costs us all in the environment, and it costs us all in sustainability. It's not that we're going to stop building single-family homes in this valley, but we cannot just build single-family homes anymore, and that's very clear. Let me see. Am I missing anything else that you guys heard that you wanted to address?
How realistic is it, do you think, to do? Well, one comment was about, further review of the public works and utilities for this area. Yeah. And a way to upgrade. I know that the residents on Labrum have really kind of suffered over the years of having this parking lot and things there. But those things will all be reviewed in a master site plan right? This isn't the only time that those things will be thoroughly looked at, right?
That's right.
Is there a chance that those would be improved?
The only chance to improve them. What Trey, the city engineers, expressed to me is that the only chance to improve that situation, really, or the best opportunity to improve that situation, is through development. As we develop this property, we can start to address the storm drainage issues that are admittedly a big problem on Labrum. That's been my conversation with him. So, and in saying that we've reviewed public services and that those public services and facilities can accommodate the growth, that doesn't mean that this very instant or tomorrow we can accommodate that growth. There are improvements that have to be made that are scheduled to be made. So there's an order to things. In development, we might make improvements that are required to bring those systems up. It's just whether those are doable or not. That's what's been evaluated, and yes, they are. So that's how we'll try to address the storm drain problem on Labrum, is with development. Again, with traffic, sorry, just to make sure I don't forget, the plans that Boyer has conceptually ever put out do not include connecting to Labrum Avenue. So there'll be no direct connection from a development of this property in our thinking as staff, both Public Works and Engineering and Planning. There would be no direct connection from this project to the neighborhood that you're in. It is adjacent and it has impacts, et cetera, but it's not like it's going to empty out onto Labrum or force some aspect of it onto Silver Shadows as well for traffic. So, But I get the traffic issue. When Winchester's backed up, you've got more units and they're going to use Silver Shadows. Absolutely understand that. Melinda, it seems like you had something you want to say.
Yeah, I just wanted, we don't have a member of Public Works here tonight to address the utility concerns, but I wanted to give a little bit more information to the public as to how that process happens. And one of the things that our Public Works Department does is they work with engineering consultants who have very sophisticated modeling capabilities of the utilities. So, gross, but they'll sit down in a sewer line and put flow meters in so that they know how much capacity is being routed through the sewer lines. They take information, they know, they're called equivalent residential units, ERUs. They look at how much an ERU across the board on average generates from a single family home, from a commercial business, from a multifamily unit. They're all different, but they take that information, they plug it into a modeling system, and the models will either say, yes, additional capacity is there, no, it's not. They do that for water, they do that for sewer, there's traffic modeling, and before we bring forward to the Planning Commission any application, we route this through all of our departments. They have an opportunity to comment. If they need to look at modeling or they know there's concerns with utility capacity, they let us know. If there was concerns on any project with access to water, sewer capacity, it wouldn't receive a positive recommendation for that very reason. So there's been a lot of concern, I think, about, or coming from the public about our utilities and the capacity, and hopefully letting you know that is the process that works behind the scenes beforehand might give a little bit of comfort that a development like this would be supported by the infrastructure that's in place. And yes, the best way to address the stormwater issues is through redevelopment. What is there existing would have to be completely re-engineered and redone to fit a new development. Since the property was developed 30 years ago, there's new low-impact development, there's new stormwater requirements that are in place, so it would be a completely different engineered system than what exists now. And the developer would pay for that on their property.
Well, while you're there, will you just address some of the comments we heard about needing to take a closer look at all of our resources, all of the city resources, and also like readdressing the general plan or redoing a master plan? Like, how realistic is that?
So the moratorium process that we just went through was that pause on development to allow for Public Works and for CED, for all the departments to look at what concerns they have, utility capacity. We just went through that with this 6-month pause and determined in certain areas, this is the density that would be supported. If it wasn't density that could be supported, we wouldn't have put that high of an allowance in code. As far as the general plan, there's the general plan that we have right now was essentially a complete overhaul that started in 2014. It was finally put in place in 2017. Best practice is that you look at those general plans and do an update every 5 years. We're right at that timeline, and I think that's probably something we need to start looking for towards next year. But as far as like officially revising the plan, that's literally what we do anytime we're bringing a general plan amendment application. And by we, I mean a property owner submits an application, pays fees to the city, and asks us to process their application. We, the city, don't go to property owners and ask them to change their zoning. They come to us and ask it. We take their fees, we process the application. This is the formal process in between those time frames to amend the general plan, to amend the zoning, and to give property owners and a community the opportunity to be flexible to the conditions that have changed since the last time a general plan would have been updated. A general plan is not meant to be a static document. It is meant to be a living, breathing document. And so this is the formal process. We start here with the Planning Commission. It moves forward one way or another with a positive or a negative recommendation and goes to the City Council, where there's another round of public hearings. And so that is the formal process right now.
And the general plan is a guiding document. It is not the law of the land.
Correct. Yes, correct.
And it's changed all the time. Anytime there's lots of things that come before, and then, you, like you said, address that. And
yeah. I mean, when we were looking at and I wasn't here in 2014, so when I say we, I mean, when Murray City was looking at the general plan and doing an overhaul in 2014, 2015, 2016, nobody anticipated the changes that would be accelerated by the conditions that have been applied worldwide the last 18 months. So we knew 5-6 years ago that retail as it stood with big box was really a dying breed. It's been hastened because of the pandemic, but to be blunt, the reality is you can have properties sit vacant for years, like Kmart sat for a few years. Shopko's been vacant for almost 3 years now. That's the choice, because big box just doesn't work that way anymore. Or it's a little bit more progressive, which is the mixed use zones. And again, we spent the 6 months with the moratorium listening to the concerns that the council had, listening to concerns that residents had, and we put into place some softer zones that we felt would be more compatible with the concerns that we heard through the process. You also have to balance the needs of the property owner who wishes to develop a property and what those needs are. There's no perfect solution. There's no one size fits all, but we worked really hard. Jared worked really hard over those 6 months to go through a process and try and get some options so that we don't end up with old, empty, dilapidated buildings.
Okay. Is there any discussion amongst the council, the commission?
I have some if it's applicable. I recognize the reality of the commercial changes that have happened in our economy. I do think that this is a situation where maybe there may be a compromise, or there's something in the middle. I think that the village multi-use perhaps works really well with those density levels when it's not surrounded by doesn't abut against a residential area. And so that's probably what I would want to throw out there on the record is that density in an area like this seems a bit steep, but I recognize that the commercial is changing. I miss RC Willie. I miss it, but it's not going to come back. And so, I do think that there's probably some room somewhere in the middle on this.
Any other discussion?
Sure, I'll jump on that. The one thing I would say is that I live in your neighborhood. I walk 9th East. I walk back in your neighborhood on a routine basis. It's my neighborhood. So I'm there. I drive 725 East. I drive at 25 miles an hour, set the cruise control to make sure I'm doing 25 miles an hour. I tick off 5 cars behind me because I'm doing 25 miles an hour, but it's my community and I want to respect my community. There's been suggestions that this would be fantastic as single family homes. The only way that's going to happen is for you guys to save up your pennies, buy the piece of property and turn it into single family homes. That's the only way that's going to happen. It's just no longer viable, whether you like that or not. One thing about increasing the density in this area is that you're putting additional eyes on the street. Right now, you have a gigantic vacant parking lot that's dark and it's easy for people to hide in. It's a nice launching point to jump into your neighborhood and rob your homes. And they rob the homes in my neighborhood as well. I've had cars broken into. I've had things stolen off my front porch. My neighbors have had cars stolen out of their garage. So I appreciate the reality of that. This is adding additional people watching out for you and looking out for you as neighbors. There's
Please be respectful. Please be respectful.
discussions
We are
about,
respectful for your comment.
vacancy rates in the commercial. And I think a lot of times when that's mentioned, it's discussed about fire clay. What's different about this particular piece of property right here is that you are on 2 high volume streets. Fire clay is on Main Street. And if you don't know fire clay exists, you've never been back on Main Street in the last 10 years. There's no reason for you to go back there unless you're going back there specifically to look at fire clay or to use the train station back in fire clay. Again, I mentioned that I want my kids to have a place to live, and this is the best shot at that, to be able to live anywhere close to me. And, hopefully your kids then have the money to be able to move into your neighborhood, or you have the ability to gift them your house when you're no longer with us. But I don't have that benefit. So this is what it's going to take for my children. So that's what I have to say. Thanks.
Are there any other comments?
I'll comment. So Murray staff has done a really good job taking a look at and considering all of the higher density residential areas within the city, from north to south, east to west, and really considered that in the overall city's development and looking to the future. For this particular area, I don't believe that it's going to be low density, as even though within the ordinance it has some incentives for developer to put in some lower density housing. The thing that excites me about the ordinance is that there's a master planning piece within it that we've brought up earlier that can come back to us, the Planning Commission, you, the citizens, to look at and come to some agreement with how the development actually happens within this property. We've already said big box, big commercial. It's not happening anymore. You could see it all over the country, not only just in Utah. And I guess my last point that Travis brought up is demographics in Utah. Most of the growth in Utah are our kids, mine as well. And it is getting more and more difficult for them to purchase your single family houses. We'd all want to be in one if we could afford one. So I appreciate all of your comments. It's a pleasure to see everybody here.
Any other thoughts? I just want to thank the public for being here and for making your comments and putting your things on the record. All of this will go to the city council. They will read these minutes. And all of these will even so, they will still read these minutes. They will see what you commented. And Boyer was here and they heard. And I hope that they took all of your concerns and considerations when they go and make their master site plan, right? And you will also have a chance to come back and comment on that when and if they do that. So you participating and being here and being part of it, I want to encourage you, go to the school board meeting. Go tell them, here are concerns. Here are some things that are affecting our school. Like, your participation in this this public process is really what makes Murray so strong. And just like Jared said, you guys have a really wonderful, strong community and neighborhood. And you being here and representing that is what makes Murray a great place to live. So thank you for being here and thank you for being part of this whole process. And there's more to the process to come. There's a multi-step, road to getting things in Murray or not in Murray. So,
can I just address the procedure?
Yes.
Even if we vote no, this still goes to the city council. The
Yes.
city council still hears everything that we do. They will still make their independent decision on this.
Thank you for clarifying that, Travis. However the vote goes, this would go on to the city council. So every comment, everything that you said will be available for the city council to read and review and participate in. So, okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we forward a recommendation of approval to City Council for the requested amendment to the general plan future land use map, redesignating the property located at 861 West Winchester and 6520, 6550, and 6580 South 900 East from general commercial to village and centers mixed use.
Is there any discussion or comment on that motion? Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Ney to forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested amendment to the general plan future land use map, redesignating the properties located at 861 West East Winchester and 6520, 6550, 6580 South and 900 East from general commercial to village and centers mixed use, with a second from Commissioner Hacker. We can take a vote.
Mr. Ney.
Yes.
Mr. Hacker.
Yes.
Ms. Milkevich.
Yes.
Ms. Wilson.
No.
Mr. Pearson.
Yes.
Mr. Lowry.
No.
And Ms. Patterson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion for our zoning map?
Madam Chair, I'll make that motion as well. Make a motion that we forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested amendment to the zoning map designation for the properties located at 861 East Winchester and 6520, 6550, and 6580 South 900 East from CD Commercial Development to WMU Village Mixed Use.
I have a motion by Commissioner Ney. Is there any discussion on that motion? Is there a second?
I'll second that motion again. I'll second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Ney to forward a recommendation of approval.
Mr. Hacker, or sorry, Mr. Ney.
Yes.
Mr. Hacker.
Yes.
Ms. Milkevich.
Yes.
Ms. Wilson.
No.
Mr. Pearson.
Yes.
Mr. Lowry.
No.
Ms. Patterson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for being here. If you would like to discuss, you can please go in the hallway. We are going to take a 5-minute recess. Okay. Or is that enough? I don't know. Longer? We will resume our meeting on our agenda item. Move on to agenda item number 8.
Do you need to call the time just to be?
Oh, what? Yeah, what time is it? 9:22. So this will just be 10 minutes, right? Yeah.
Thank you for being willing to listen to me one more time. That's okay. This is similarly a dual application, a general plan, future land use map amendment, as well as a zone map amendment, and for very similar purposes. This is a future land use map amendment from general commercial to village and centers mixed use, and a zone map amendment from CD zoning to the CMU zone, the centers mixed use zone. So there are some distinctions there we're going to want to talk about. The property is the point at 53rd, so there's several properties altogether, 13.22 acres. A lot of going concerns commercially. Again, obviously no residential on the project. CD zoning does not support any kind of residential uses. The application is to make these amendments to allow potential redevelopment in the future, including higher density residential multifamily dwellings, as well as the commercial that's there, and including some reordering of commercial, et cetera. We'll have to look at all that in site plans. This is just, again, the zone map amendments. This is, again, in the CD zone. The property is located in back of Murray Park, so you can see that open space zoning to the east. It is in the general commercial, as we said, future land use category, and the request is to go to the newly created village and centers mixed use category to support the zoning that's been requested. I did want to just show this. This kind of puts it in context. You can still see that CD zoning laid there, and this is the property we're talking about, the Murray Park. You can see how close it is to the downtown. It's just at the fringe there at the outside, and fairly close to the Trax station and Murray Central Station, with some significant kind of impediments to the pedestrian activity or the ability to get back and forth. It's close, but it's kind of a parking lot wasteland in between with the hospital. Some of the things that make the site a great site as a mixed-use site and contribute to that, the park space, the IMC hospital, the activity on State Street, also kind of impede the ability to really add significant densities, and that's why we proposed this centers mixed-use zone for projects like this or for properties like this. The same considerations that we reviewed in the village mixed-use amendment request in the previous hearing are present here. This is supposed to be the centers mixed-use, and this village and centers mixed-use category is supposed to be applied in certain ways. But again, I just feel it's important to point out that we did anticipate in 2017 that we would need to make these kinds of changes. So these shouldn't be wholly surprising to anybody. This is where we knew commercial was headed. We knew we needed to try to start addressing that need to add residential to these sites and keep them viable. We didn't know how to do it in 2017, so we said we're going to need to do it. We'll start that process later. That's the current designation, general commercial. The recommended from staff and the request is for village and centers. Again, it's supposed to be applied along major transportation corridors and where certain things have been identified in the general plan. I want to talk about that. It does meet a lot of objectives from the general plan as well, and they're kind of interesting ones, so I wanted to point those out. Encouraging revitalization along key transportation corridors and in the core of the city. This is just there in the core of the city. You could argue that it's part of that core city, and it is definitely along a transportation corridor. Encouraging form-based mixed-use development patterns to connect the downtown to the TOD areas through urban design. This would contribute to that goal, that objective. Again, with the strategy, change zoning in targeted areas to allow for form-based mixed-use development. That's important here. Providing complementary uses around key civic spaces, including Murray Park, the library, City Hall, and I would include IMC, except that it gets its own objective at the bottom. Support the Intermountain Medical Center through compatible and complementary land uses. This goes a long way toward doing that as an application and as a landform. Considering the CMU zone, again, we wrote very similarly requirements for where it ought to be considered. First and foremost, that it ought to be considered for property and developments along major transportation corridors and in and around retail and commercial centers that are identified by the 2017 general plan. This area, again, we mentioned that it's a BRT station. It's also kind of at the fringe of two different city and retail and regional commercial areas. that were identified. And it ought to be considered for property or properties which are at least 3 acres or more. Again, this is 13.22 acres, so plenty big enough for consideration. And properties that are zoned or used for non-residential purposes. We don't want to take parkland away. We don't want to close the golf course and turn it into centers, mixed-use development, et cetera. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at revitalizing existing commercial facilities, especially in a corridor like State Street. Other considerations include those tests, those goals that we mentioned before. This particular application meets 7 of the 9, resulting in high quality development of commercial properties. This is a very going concern, a very high quality development. We want to see that it stays that way, and this zoning will allow the Howland Partners to keep that project up to date, to update it and make it into a real lifestyle center. Should retain or rehabilitate the commercial uses of a significant portion of the property. Again, 13.22 acres, and most of that will remain commercial. In any redevelopment, this is State Street with 44,000 cars a day, really good, viable loads for commercial to thrive there. And to really make the most of it, we want to be able to add that residential. Increase local access to commercial services for in-project residents as well as for residents of the surrounding area. The IMC hospital is there, Costco is there, there are lots of restaurants there. There'll be new concerns there as well. So it does definitely meet that goal. Promoting a greater variety of housing options within Murray neighborhoods. There are currently no housing options in this exact neighborhood, so this will definitely do that and provide some ability to have housing right there by the hospital is really a good opportunity. Can't talk anymore tonight. Promoting opportunities for life cycle housing and for moderate income households. Again, it is kind of in the market that we currently have in Utah, and with as much as properties are worth, including studio apartments in terms of rent, it is a numbers game in terms of affordable housing right now. Until we can get more funding, and as we keep working on it, we need to find other ways to support moderate income housing. But this is a really good one to add higher density housing in areas like this that increases our total unit count and brings prices down through supply and demand overall. Increasing walkability on the project site and resulting in walkable connections to the surrounding residential neighborhoods. The project is ideally situated to be connected to the park, to be connected to IMC and to other concerns on State Street, and creating and contributing to a sense of place and community. Through the design guidelines that we have, and I selected this picture to show you here because of the central feature, through the design guidelines that we use in conjunction with this kind of zoning, with the CMU zone, we'll be able to look for central features and increasing and enhancing kind of the things that are happening already on the site. So it does meet 7 of the 9 findings in staff's opinion. The CMU zone, again, the biggest difference is that there's no allowance for residential and CD zoning that exists there, but 35 units per acre as a base is allowable in the CMU zone that we have crafted. And you have opportunities to increase that unit count by through different means. They are slightly different than in the VMU zone. For example, in the VMU zone, you can only increase your density by providing open space and amenities or providing affordable housing. In the CMU zone, we really wanted to double down because it's in the more commercial already areas. We wanted to double down on keeping that commercial and revitalizing more commercial. So as you provide more commercial than you're required by the zoning, you can increase your density slightly. Again, required parking. These are greater parking standards than we have in typical mixed-use zones, even though it is close to that Central Murray Central Station. Because of those barriers, we are requiring 1.15 spaces, 1.5 spaces for a 1-bedroom unit, 1.85 spaces for a 2-bedroom unit, 2.5 spaces for anything 3 bedrooms and up. Again, you have the joint use that shared use parking really helps. The consultants helped us with a parking analysis that showed how that would kind of work and what numbers we should propose for a commercial. And we have 1 space for 350 for offices, 1 space for 350 for medical and dental, a space for 300 for retail, and a space for 300 for restaurants. Those are lower than our typical CD parking requirements. Not by a ton, but lower, definitely. And they depend on that shared use. The master site plan is required for these kind of developments. Any project that is proposed, if the zoning is changed, has to come to the Planning Commission for a master site plan. We review building orientation, we review the central feature and require that. We review the pedestrian connections. We also look at the buffering, all those things, and I don't have a slide for the buffering in this one, but that same buffering language for single-family zoning, although there's no single-family zoning around this particular project, is there for those projects that do happen to be located where they might be adjacent to single family. The adequate public facilities review, parking analyses, and traffic impact studies have to accompany those site plan applications. And again, there's at the end a master site plan agreement that has to go from the Planning Commission to the City Council for final approval. The applicants will have to sign it or agree to it, and the city will agree to it, and it will govern any of the phasing, how much of the commercial can be, how much of the residential can be built right now. On a project with as much commercial as already existing as this, it won't be hard to do that agreement because there's enough commercial already to probably support the residential that they would want to do, but we still have that agreement to do. We are recommending approval as staff for this change. We feel like that CMU zone is appropriate for this area. We had these kinds of properties, the Howland Partners property as well as some others along State Street in mind when we wrote it. It could be applicable to other areas as you see in that mapping. There are other areas that might have it be applicable, but this State Street corridor, if I'm being frank, is really where we're looking at for the CMU zone in most instances. Do you have any questions as commission for me?
You may have gone over it. Can you talk about the height?
Yeah.
Where there's no residential next door to it.
Yeah, no residential next door to it. There is not a height limitation here. Oh, yeah. Okay, great. Thanks.
It really is just the density limitation.
It's just the density that limits that, yeah. And in the CD zone, if I can, this is an easy way to point this out. In the CD zone, you have a 30-foot height limitation within 100 feet of residential. This property doesn't have that limitation right now. So there's effectively no change to the height allowances on this property from what it has right now. It's far enough from residential that you could go higher than you'd ever want to go on this property. And we don't have a limitation other than the buffering of residential for the CMU zone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Travis. Good question.
Well, just for point of discussion, because that sounds scary that
Yeah.
you could go as high as you want to go. The density limits that. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't make sense to go 40 feet high because you'd have one house, one story,
Right.
one unit on top of each.
Yeah, your building footprints that are reasonable and versus your density are going to drive that. We're seeing with density allowances of 80 units to the acre, we're seeing 5-story buildings. So at 35 units to the acre, 40 units to the acre, 45 units to the acre, you're going to see 3 and 4 and maybe 5 on a compact area. And the reason we didn't want to limit the height in this kind of zone, even though it is a lower density zone, is exactly that. If he's able to compact that footprint and go up one more floor and keep more of the commercial viable instead of taking up space with more surface parking or more of that residential building, and it's not hurting any residential zones, we don't want to limit that ability to put that 4th story on or that 5th story because it keeps more commercial space available for viability. So that's the thinking behind the no height requirement for it. These areas are not generally close to residential, and where they are, they're going to be limited the same way the VMU is.
The goal in this one is to really push this property or this new project that comes forward at some point towards State Street.
Sure.
How do we do that with the existing commercial spaces that are currently there? I mean, Chick-fil-A owns their own pad site. I don't know if Noodles and Company in that building owns its own pad site or not.
Yeah.
And to add to that question, I was going to ask the exact same question, but the requirements in this zone that we're looking at requires there be nothing between the street and the building.
No parking between the streets and the buildings.
But existing buildings are there, so.
Existing buildings are exempted under one clause in this code. Same with the VMU. Existing commercial structures, we do want to try to preserve what we can, and we're not looking for a total rebuild on these projects. We're hoping to revitalize what's there. So new structures that go up, we want to see with no parking between them and the street, and we have a slightly larger setback that can be allowed for landscaping, et cetera, than we do in the other zones, but not by a lot. We want to push them toward the street where the new construction happens. But there is an exemption because of existing buildings.
If they were to tear down an existing building, they'd have to meet the new requirements.
Yeah,
If they use an existing building, then it's.
If they raised everything and started over, we'd push it all toward the street. And on a site this big, actually, there'd be stuff on the street and stuff behind that stuff on the street with parking between it. That's what you'll probably see the street fill out with 44,000 cars a day. You're going to see that street frontage fill out with commercial pads, and I'm sure they want to do that in the future. But we'll have to wait to see the site plans for that.
So with like the other property, and we're talking about master site plans and we're regulating like when commercial, but their commercial component probably is different because of it. Parts of it are filled before they're putting residential in and stuff. So are they already meeting like?
They would far exceed now what they have. But
so it would be different than like the starting from scratch in the village mixed use where they're like putting residential and we're requiring certain commercial things before you can.
That's exactly right. In the village mixed use that you just recommended, the RC Willie site is maybe a little unique. It was constructed. I should have had Susan look up when it was built, and I'd love to read the minutes from when it was built. She probably already knows. When was the RC Willey building built? 70s. So I'd love to read the minutes from that, but it was built for RC Willey. It wasn't like RC Willey came after something else. So it's a kind of a unique building. It's a lot of square footage for that corner. It's a lot of parking for that corner. If it hadn't been built specifically for RC Willey, it probably wouldn't have been built. It would be the gas station and maybe something else, and the back would have been subdivided. But RC Willey was in the way from the 70s forward. So it's a unique site. Jeremy, you had a...
Yeah, as much as I probably have misgivings about the VMU and the density, I really love the CMU. To me, lends to what I tend to think of as lifestyle centers.
Yeah.
We could all name off a whole bunch of them.
Our favorite one.
Right, exactly. But all of them seem to have a really significant public component that draws people into those. What type of public input process is going to be do we have for that, and how much space is required for those for the
central feature?
For the central feature, yeah.
We don't define that, so
Okay.
it's up to you guys as you look at the master site plan whether they've done enough to make a central unifying feature or not.
Okay.
And this would be a good candidate for that kind of thing. The park provides a lot of really good open space already, so a lot of what you might have needed for recreation for in-residents could go the direction of drawing public into the site for retail as well. Skating rink, center, or whatever.
I mean, I think the CMU and the scale these can be kind of showpieces for a city, if that makes sense.
We hope so.
Yeah.
Good point. Thank you. Any other questions, Lisa?
Along the same lines of thought, always when we talk about mixed use and density, we're worried about what's around it.
Yeah.
I'm worried about the park. I love the park. I think we have an amazing park. I think people outside of Murray love our park. Before the meeting, there was mention about increases in funding in the park department. I'm just worried that by building high density next to a park, our park will not have the same feel. It'll be crowded.
And that's a legitimate concern. I would counter that the open space of the park, and remember, you've got the park and you've got the county facilities as well that are very, very open. With all of that, I don't see it being a visual or aesthetically very sort of impactful to the park because there is so much open space right immediately to the east and north of this property. But also, the only thing I would see it increasing would be use of the park from residents in this project, which is exactly what we ought to do. Currently, people drive to the park and find somewhere to park near the park center and then go into the park and enjoy it. These 300 households, or however many it winds up being, will be able to walk directly back into the park, and that keeps it safer at all times of day, more active all the time, and we are going to get more funding for parks to
and
use to
there's
keep
more
things up.
funding for grooming, safety, cleaning.
Yeah, exactly. We can use that funding for park improvements. So as they wear out faster because there's more people using them, it's to maintain levels of service or increase them.
Would you mind mentioning it just for the public record? What the increase is per unit?
I never can remember the exact number, and it wasn't our department's kind of thing. It was Parks and Rec's deal. I'm not a numbers guy.
I am not a numbers person either, but it is about $49.50 for a multifamily residential unit per unit.
4,950.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
okay.
$49.60 something. It's $5,400 per single family residential unit.
And that's yearly taxes or what?
No, that's a new park impact fee that will go into place in 90 days.
When it's built. Wow. Cool.
Yeah, so if there was 100 unit multifamily, that would be 400.
Don't look at me.
90,000. I don't know. Don't ask me to do math.
Zach, help them out. You, your computer.
Yeah, I mean that would be $500,000. So you're 200 units. You're talking a couple $1 million that would go into the park impact fees that would then be utilized to pay for new park amenities, additions to the park, not for maintenance, not for replace and repair in kind, but new parks, new amenities, new open space.
Jared, I know, again, we don't have a project before us. The northwest corner, there's an informal street that goes between Cottonwood Street, along Chick-fil-A, along Zupa's. There's an entrance that goes into the park. We're actively looking to maintain this.
Again, without the site plan, I don't know, but it's great that you mentioned that, because it comes up that it's not necessarily safe to walk in that area right now.
I've mentioned that a time or two.
I wasn't going to say that it was you that brought it up, but yeah. It's a hard area to walk in right now, and redeveloping this site will let us address some of those issues better. And I don't know whether it stays open or not. I couldn't say that, but
I'd encourage it. I use it all the time. Yeah. It's a nice sneaky way from the hospital back to the park and up to Vine Street. You can avoid some traffic there.
The mark of a true denizen of an area to know all the sneaky ways through parking lots. Yeah, no, I don't know. We'll have to look at that in site plan. But connectivity, but it's good that you mentioned that. Connectivity, it's one of the tenets of the master site plan approval process, is that you look at connectivity vehicular-wise, you look at it pedestrian-wise, and try to increase it on the site itself and from the site to surrounding areas. Consider it in the redevelopment. We did that up on Van Winkle Crossing. If you remember, it's adjacent to Ivy Place. And while they did not want to maintain that connection, we kept that open. And it was a real challenge to keep the sidewalks. Keeping the sidewalks showing up in the site plans as it went through the building permit process was a real challenge. So, but there will still be sidewalks into Ivy Place. That kind of thing will help us here too.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Can you talk about the future plans for public transportation down along that corridor?
Along State Street.
Yeah.
I'm probably not as good for it as Zach would be, but I'm thinking of the Mid-Valley Connector. Sorry. The State Street BRT is coming. I'm not sure. I think it's in phase 1, so it's within 5 years that they'll want to dedicate lane access on State Street for a bus rapid transit, and this will be one village stop all up State Street. This is going to go from Sandy all the way to uptown.
Do you know if they're planning on having the stops, where they're planning on having the stops? Are they in the center of the street, or are they on the sides
I don't know
of the
that.
street?
I wish I knew that. I'm sorry, I don't. But I'll remember to ask next time at the RTP meetings. So
okay, I just know well-planned cities that have transportation usually have a place for the bus to pull off the road, so we're not impeding traffic. And if this is going to be redeveloped, then maybe that could be taken into consideration.
This is slated to be one of the stops. It's a station village, and that kind of does imply that you'd pull over into it, and there'd be some kind of connection from. We'll want to look at that in site planning, but I don't know if I just kind of assumed it would be off to the side of the road, not into the middle lane, but I don't know that into the median.
They'll determine those stops when they actually do the study to put it in. I should know all of these answers for you, Jake, but I don't.
See Ned after the meeting.
So they don't have that planned out yet. It's just
It's just the big
They'll
picture.
do some environmental work, even just, the BRT stations are significantly bigger than a bus stop, in which case they need environmental review. So they will look at all those stops and do environmental analysis of them before anything goes in.
And again, I know it's not germane to this conversation, but do we know if there's going to be some sort of mix that's going to take it up through the track stops as well, or is it just going to be dedicated State Street?
I think for this particular one, it stays on State Street.
The entire way.
Good points. Anything else? Thank you all.
All right. We'll have the applicants come up and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Gary Howland. I'm trying if I get my phone to go right here. So I'm Gary Howland. My address is 9450 South Redwood Road, South Jordan, Utah 84095. Sorry, it's been a very, very long day. So anyway, we're grateful for the opportunity that we have to talk to you about this project. We've been working with the Economic Development Director, Melinda, and Jared for quite some time on this. I think, was it December that we met with the City Council prior to or before this new zoning was implemented. And at that particular meeting, there was a pretty favorable response, it seemed, and it appeared like that in all likelihood we probably could have got it approved. I can't say that for a fact, but, one of the city council members, actually stood up and just said, hey, Mr. Howland has done everything that he said he's done. I don't understand why, we're just not pushing this through, because he's built a beautiful project. I just got notice this last evening about the community Facebook page from Murray, and as I got on and read some of the comments, it was so frustrating because of so much misinformation and miscommunication that goes on in that forum. First of all, and again, I don't want to take up a lot of time, but I want to give you a little bit of history about this project, because many of you may not have been here when I did the Point at 53rd. I've been developing real estate for over 30 years, and the Point at 53rd was without a doubt the hardest project that I've ever had to do. It first consisted of 6 acres that sat right on the corner that had the paint store and a couple other small shops. But in order for me to be able to get this project through, I had to buy the National Guard Armory. I had to go through Salt Lake County, buy the county fairgrounds. I had to go up 53rd South, and because the Armory and because the ice rink had a parking sharing arrangement, I had to take out 5 homes along 53rd Street. And as a result of that, one woman stood up at this pulpit, that same night when we were trying to get it approved, saying that she had it on sound ground that she knew that Mr. Howland was a known pedophile. And, so needless to say, it was a very, very difficult, project to get approved. But, we stuck with it. And we got it done. And I will say this, one of the things that has been frustrating on, again, this forum is that, Mr. Howland and the developers are nothing but money grabbers, build it, and then they're out of there. This project I have owned since inception. I've owned it for over 21 years. Our average occupancy prior to COVID-19 was 98%. It was probably one of the best centers in the Salt Lake Valley as far as income, as far as sales. For Best Buy, it was number 1 or number 2 between 21st South and our store as far as the number 1, 2 store in the state of Utah. Mimi's was the second best store in all of their chain, okay, other than the one that they had in Vegas. And so it was just a fabulous center. I was offered less than a year after I completed this center. We were in it about 27 million, and I was offered $50 million at IHOP by a public REIT, to sell the center. And I had no desire to sell the center, and I still have no desire to sell the center. And everybody says all I want to do is come in, develop it, build it, and get out. The center is not going to be sold during my lifetime, depending on what those partners that I'm in with it, as well as those in my family trust decide to do with it, and the partners that will have their family trust in it, they can decide whether they want to sell it. But in my opinion, it's an irreplaceable property. Jeff Neese, I don't know how many of you know his name, but Jeff Neese is required by all banks and lending institutions in the state of Utah, and it may not be. There may be a couple others. I'm not sure. Do you know, Dana, if it's more than Jeff Neese? There's a few. Jeff Neese did the apartment study on this particular site, and he said in the 30 years that he's been in business, this is the second best site that he's seen for apartments in his 30 years of doing business. The other thing that I think that is really important to note is I keep hearing and I keep reading on Facebook, did you know this developer has the right now to do 585 apartments? When we went to city council prior to this, Okay, it was 1,000. The only reason that they tabled at the city council meeting wasn't because I was doing 1,000 apartments. They was afraid that I was going to get hit by a car on the street, I think, the next day, and they didn't know who was going to end up owning it, and they would pass a zone where somebody could actually put 1,000 apartments in it. I don't care if I can do 575 apartments in this center. I will not do 575 apartments. It will kill the center. My objective and my goal is to sit down with the city planners, with Melinda, with Jared, and everybody else, and to try and make this project work and make it work so that the numbers work, so that it doesn't kill the traffic. We use Ryan Hell's pretty much exclusively on all of our traffic study. And before we even get into how many number of units that we do, we'll do a traffic study to know what impact that it will have. We're doing a development down in Lehigh. We have 100 acres to start on I-15 and 92 and go all the way down to Young Living on the east side of the street. We built the hospital down there. We built the skilled nursing facility down there. We just closed on some other ground that we're developing and in a joint venture with a company called Salt Development that did Northwestern Hardware in Salt Lake. They're now just doing the apartments where we're doing the retail. But between Tina and I, for the last 2.5 years, talking about bus transit, we've been the ones that have pushed, because of the promises that were made to those in Lehigh, the tracks would get to Adobe and everybody else. But through Governor Herbert's help, through Carlton Christensen's help, we've pushed bus transit from the Draper Station, where now it's at the top of the heap, where it's going to go from the Draper Station over to the prison, back over the other side of the freeway, behind Adobe, and then the station is going to stop at the end of the hospital, and then they're going to do a beeline over the freeway to Front Runner. And all of those efforts, all of that time, all that energy, and us spending almost $2.5 million, about $2.5 million to get that done, because UDOT decided to make 2 one-way roads on the streets down there. Now, again, the only reason that I bring all that up is because we work with cities to build developments that are pride of ownership and that truly are walkable, livable communities. And I mean, I can't say that word enough. Walkable, livable communities. And that's what we want Murray to be, a walkable, livable community. It's absolutely paramount for us, Best Buy, when the economy was floundering. Best Buy had a number of stores. I came to find out that I was the owner, the only owner, or the only landlord of the Best Buy that agreed to reduce their rent. They were paying $18, $19 a square foot, and we dropped it to $11.50 a square foot. Their rent is now $12.50 a square foot. We're doing industrial warehouse distribution space right now in Bluffdale on 2700 West and Bangor Highway, and it's about $10 to $12 a square foot. So Best Buy is on the best piece of property you could be, okay, and they're paying industrial warehouse prices. One last thing about Best Buy. I went to a Best Buy. Yesterday was my wife's birthday, and she wanted some Air iPods. She'd lost hers, and I went into the Best Buy in Sandy because we now live in South Jordan. I lived in Murray my whole life. Buried my father today, as I said, and all of my siblings. We all went to Murray High School. I'd still be living in Murray had I not got divorced. But I went to a Best Buy, and there were 6 employees in a 35,000 square foot store. I had to wait 45 minutes to get a pair of Pro they would call them the iPods. I tell you that because Best Buy is nothing more than a warehouse. It's a distribution center. Is Best Buy going to survive? Absolutely. It's going to survive for one reason and one reason only, because of the Geek Squad. They price match, and people can go in, see it, touch it, and feel it. But at the end of the day, it's a warehouse. They don't have the employees. They don't have the people to tell you about anything, and you just can't get the service. And so at the end of the day, we knew that it was just a matter of time before Best Buy was going to choose between our store or the store at 21st and close one of the stores. Walmart's going to probably close a third of their stores over the next 10 to 15 years. Most all of the big box stores are going to close them. Wall Street used to value stores and their stock. They didn't look at their earnings. They looked solely at one thing: how many stores they opened every year. If they were opening up stores, they were doing well, and so the stock did well. And they found that it had nothing to do with store openings. It had to do with making money, because as they opened stores, all they were doing is stealing sales from one store to the next. So in any event, we are on our 117th site plan in Lehigh. 117th. So I tell you that because we're on a 117th site plan because we work with the city to come up with the best possible use that we can for the tenants, the multi-use development, and everything else, so that it's just not something that we bring to you and say, okay, this is what we want to build. We want the citizens' input. We want the city's input. We want to build a beautiful project that becomes an icon for Murray City that they're proud of. Was anybody proud of what Murray's 53rd and State looked like before we tore the National Guard Armory down and before we tore the fairgrounds down and did the things that we did? And yet, the night that I came in here to get that project approved, you saw how many people were here tonight? There were 3 times that many that went clear out into the halls in opposition of the point at 53rd. Ask those people now, today, if they like the point at 53rd. And that's what is going to be the exact same thing that happens if we're successful in getting this project approved through City Council and through you. Thank you for your time. Dana or Tina, do either of you have anything that you'd like to add? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. This time we would like to open this item up for public comment regarding this agenda item. If you would like to speak to it, you can come up and state your name and address at the podium and then fill out a paper afterwards.
You want to read something? Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Zach. Yes, I didn't realize there were emails for this one too. I should have assumed. Sorry about that.
Yeah, just 2 on this one. One I've already read, but I have to read it again. So this is from Sonia DeVore. I am against rezoning the area around the Best Buy in Murray and R.C. Willey, though we do need housing for so many people. I would like to be very clear about the concerns surrounding yet another high-rise apartment building in Murray. Traffic: the developer would have us believe that people in these units will use public transportation and the traffic won't be as big an issue as we think. In one of the studies for the Galleria project, the recommendation is to make Murray Boulevard a 5-lane road. Kind of ironic, since you would have to demolish some multifamily housing to accomplish this. Granted, it is a much bigger project at the Galleria than the proposal at Best Buy, but traffic will be increased. Look at the traffic snarls we have now in the area. If we are going to need to improve this area with new roads, let's get that done first, but building better roads that carry more people brings its own issue of degradation of our air quality even more. Crime. More people, more crime, just a fact. Does Murray have the resources to hire more officers, buy more patrol cars? I would like some input from the Murray Police Department as to how they feel about all this dense housing. I live in a neighborhood very near the new Murray Crossing, as well as Hunter's Woods and the Clover Creek Apartments. I have lived in this neighborhood for 25 years, and since this buildup of the new rentals across from Hunter's Woods and Murray Crossing, etc., there has most definitely been an increase in petty crime. Schools. The developer of the Best Buy project would have you believe that most of the residents will be surgeons and work from home professionals. I would like to know if this project will have any kids of subsidies such as Section 8 or Section 429. The programs appeal to a great deal to families who have children who go to school. A transient population brings additional challenges for teachers. My grandchildren went to Parkside for many years. And of course, just the additional class size is a challenge. Are we ready for that? Will we need more teachers, more buildings? Aesthetics. To be realistic, growth and change is inevitable. We will never have that small town feel again, but we can have development that is inviting, pleasant, and that honors Murray's rich history and heritage. Many of these new developments around town bring to mind some of the post-war buildings I have seen in East Germany, concrete. Let's not look like every other city and give up everything that has made Murray unique. Change and progress are inevitable, but we need to be smart about it. It's ready, set, fire. Let's make sure we keep the right order. Sincerely, Sonia DeVore. And next one is from Matt Schneider. Hello, I am writing to urge you to not approve the rezoning for the addition of many high-density units at this location. I know the commission will inevitably say that they are only approving a zoning change and not a specific project, but once the change is approved, you will use that as justification for approving future site plans. Murray residents do not want high-density housing, especially that which is only rentals. Perhaps they could commit to all purchasable housing. The developer insists it will lower traffic, but cannot provide any justification for this. More people equal more traffic and infrastructure needs. Please do not rush through this when it's clear citizens don't want it. Do not prioritize developer needs over citizen concerns. Thank you, Matt Schneider, Murray resident.
Thank you, Zach. Okay, we can have our... Oh, did you have one, Susan?
Sorry, Clark Bullen emailed a message. I just wanted to know if you wanted to read it or if you want to make your comments. Okay. And not this one. Okay.
Hi, thank you. I again recommend that we wait.
Sorry, would you state your name?
Hi, I'm Clark Bullen. I live in District 3. I live just by the Arboretum, so probably the closest actual house to this development. I again recommend that we wait until the official revision of the general plan. We're due. There's an unprecedented demand for high-density housing, and therefore we have good reason to do an official revision. That said, I realize that approving the last project with so many neighbors who had so many concerns, there's probably not a lot of hope of this project not being approved. But that I did talk with Gary. Gary seems to have the best intentions for Murray. He really does. Dan Snar had good things to say about Gary when I talked to him. And I agree with Gary on a lot of things. This is an irreplaceable property. And I was impressed that he was personally answering questions on Facebook today of concerned citizens. Just a few concerns about the project to speak for the users of the park. The Carnegie development, that'll have 130 units with only 137 parking spaces. There will probably be a lot of parking on Vine and into the park. That will probably only be exacerbated by adding more density to this unit. So in light of that, Chick-fil-A, the traffic there will push traffic from this development into the park. As people go into the park, they'll probably rush by trying to get wherever they need to go. That road in the park, it's a very low speed limit, but it goes right near the playground. Like it's very close to one of the slides. And so I do feel like that's dangerous, and like increasing traffic and potentially speed on that road is a danger, I believe. Hillcrest drop-offs are around 8 a.m. and it's already a snarled mess. If you have people trying to get to work around that same time, it's going to be even worse. I spoke to one student who was a student a few years ago who was hit in that intersection. Recently, another student was hit in that intersection. That student brought the issue, to the city recently. So that needs to be considered. Also, the Parkside, heard from one of the city council members at a different city council meeting recently that Parkside suffers from the transient nature of the residents in the many apartments around the area. So increasing the population of students that attends Parkside and maybe other students go elsewhere that live in apartments can increase that as well. These are all issues I think we need to look at for this project. Also, not sure how the zoning was able to be changed on the Galleria property. Like, once somebody owns it, how do you reduce it from 80 to 40? That's still 1,300 units. That's still pretty darn close to this development. And that traffic right there in the middle, I feel like could get dicey. So all things I think you should consider. That said, I do feel like there is potential for a good project in this area. I'm just not sure that now is the right time to do so until we evaluate all of the density coming into the city. Thank you.
Good timing. Okay, sir, thank you. Sorry. Thank you for waiting.
Sorry.
My name is Scott Murray. I'm longtime Murray. What? 543 East Moss Creek Drive in Murray. My parents came here when they were like 5 years old. I've got grandkids. My whole family's graduated from Murray and still going there. So anyway, little background. I've got to know Gary somewhat over the years, but I didn't know him when I first started working. I used to own Terry's RV Center for about 38 years. I sold it to Paris RV 5 years ago. But when I originally started there, when I was 15, the property that was where this was located was 4.5 acres of where the Best Buy and all that sits. So that was 4.5 of that first 6 that he was buying. There was a 30 to 33 spot trailer park, the old El Rancho Motel, and an old showroom where we had the trailer sales. And so from when I was 15 to 26, I worked there. When I was 26, I bought Terry out. And then at, 30, 31, I bought up up the street where the business was, where it still is now, other than it's Paris RV. But what he has done, what their development company has done with that property, I think back what it was 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Nobody knows that ground like me. I used to have to go fix all the sewers under the trailers and all that. That place was just unsightly. And just kudos to them of how good that they've developed that, and what they've done has just been really pleasant to see done in Murray. And I know that their heart is to do the right thing and to really do a good job. So, obviously I'm for it, and I appreciate it and appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Janice Strobel. I live in District 3. And I think a couple things that's kind of interesting about the way these 2 new mixed-use zones are working, at least as much as I'm understanding right now, is they have to come forward saying that they meet 5 of the 9 goals. And so it's a project, and yet we're approving the zoning. So we're not approving the project, but the project has to come forward with meeting 5 of the goals. So it's kind of seems conflicting there. And then the question I have, we talked about how once zoning gets approved, then they can come back and they can change what they actually had thought they were going to build, but they got the zoning, and so now they're going to build it this way. Can they change the goals that they got approved for this new mixed use by? Can the goals be different? Okay, so and I know, but I think we've really got to look at what these zonings can mean for us in our community. And when we talk about shared parking, yeah, it's all good if it works. And many times we can say it will work on paper. But I do drive by Murray Crossing every day. And I see that all the parking that's on the street, that the retail that's empty still, would want to have people be able to park at, is gone. So I don't see how it's attracting commercial to be there. So that's the thing, is this shared parking sometimes doesn't quite work. And it's filled up on the street. So anyway, then, okay, here we go. I gotta figure out my order here.
Is the microphone on?
It doesn't feel like it is. And guess what? I guess I pushed it when I was moving it, so it wasn't on. Okay, it's on now.
I hear you.
Of course. Okay, sorry. Okay, I'm going to talk about 3 of the goals that are listed, the 7 that were listed for this applicant. It talks about promoting a greater variety of housing options within Murray neighborhoods. I don't see how this is within a Murray neighborhood. And it says at the end of that, density will have little impact to established residential neighborhoods. So how is that within? And how is it going to have little impact? How do we know that by them making that statement? What tells us that that goal is going to be met? Okay, the next one, promote opportunities for life cycle housing and housing for moderate income households. I look at that life cycle housing, I'm thinking, okay, what are you talking about? You're talking about people can live here and then they can move to this other part of the community. But is it all rental? So we're talking about people will be renting for life? I'm sorry, I know we're talking about how developments now are so much rental, but because of, I will submit that because of the inability for developers for the city to say, we can't say that it has to be owner occupied developments, we are really playing into investors just loving to invest in developments that are apartments. And I asked someone today, why is it that, there's so much apartments being built? And what was said to me is, you can't raise rents on owner occupied. So are we really helping the income if we keep people in rentals for their life? Is that really what we want for our children, to be in rentals for life?
Your time is
I
up.
know, okay, guys, but there's a lot to consider, and we are dealing with the most dangerous intersection we have in our city. I don't know how that can be adequately addressed when we're talking about zoning, but we are talking about the most dangerous intersection we have in our city. 2 schools, a hospital, 2 hotels, and an assisted living center with a memory care center as part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public comment portion and have staff address.
There's just one thing there that Janice was talking about that I want to clarify, because
Sure.
I didn't do a very good job of talking about that. So with the findings that we make when we consider the zone, I just want to read the section. 17-162-030 is the findings required section, and it reads like this. The center's mixed-use CMU zone should only be considered where Murray City officials find that mixed-use zoning, not the project that's being presented or the anticipated project, but that mixed-use zoning will result in land use patterns and development that will meet a minimum of 5 of the following goals. So we know that there's not a project, but that's not what we're really considering. When we say that we think it'll result in whatever, or we talk about it won't have an impact or it'll increase neighborhood walkability or whatever, we don't mean the project, because we're not considering a project. We mean mixed-use zoning versus the traditional zoning that was there in the first place. We only want to consider it where we can say mixed-use zoning will do a better job of doing these, making these findings happen, making these goals happen than traditional zoning. That's the difference there, I think. So.
And this is where our conversations have talked about the neighborhoods over here, that adding this type of zoning in the established neighborhoods is not going to improve those neighborhoods.
Right.
Those neighborhoods are already as high a quality a neighborhood as you could ask for.
Right. And you wouldn't get any, if there are places in the city, there are properties in the city where you could ask for this zone, and we'd look through these lists and say mixed use zoning isn't gonna help that area. It's not going to help that project. So unless we're saying that we think it will, we shouldn't consider it. That's the point of the findings. And in our case, we feel like 7 of them. Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I probably just have a comment that if you don't mind. As much as I have misgivings about the VMU and the density, I think that the CMU is a great use, and I think that want to commend the owner of the property for it's a great development that you have there, and so I think that from my perspective, this is a great. Well, I'll back up and say, I think that the small commercial is the wave of the future. I think we're going to see a lot more requests for this. If you look around, we're probably behind the times when it comes to this type of development. And I think that, from my perspective, what a great one out of the gate, to point to as what I believe will be a successful development. So I'm grateful for that and excited for it. With that, I'll make a motion unless no one has anything else to say. I make a motion to forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the request amendment to the general plan, future land use map, redesignating the properties located at 5238, 5257, and 5177 South State Street and 151 East, 5300 South from general commercial to village and centers mixed use.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Lowry. Is there any discussion on that motion? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Lowry and a second by Commissioner Nee.
Thanks. Mr. Lowry?
Yes.
Mr. Hacker?
Yes.
Was it Ned or Travis?
It was Ned.
Oh, sorry, I wrote down.
That's all right.
Sorry.
You got the N right.
I had my back turned and I got it right. Sorry, it's Mr. Lowry.
Yes, still.
Mr. Hacker.
Do we have to answer again?
Yes.
Sorry.
I'd like you to answer again, please. I'm just
Yes.
Mr. Nay.
Yes.
Miss Milkevich?
Yes.
Miss Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Pearson?
Yes.
Miss Patterson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there a motion on the
I'll make a motion,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chairman, to forward a recommendation of approval of the City Council for the request amendment to the zoning map designation of the properties located at 5238, 5257, and 5177 South State Main Street, South State Street, and 151 East, 5300 South from CD commercial development to CMU centers mixed use.
I have a motion by Commissioner Lowry. Is there any discussion on that motion? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Oh, okay. I think we do too.
Oh, you know what? Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yep.
As long as it's right on the up.
Doesn't change my second.
Thank you. No, I'm glad. No, I'm glad to know.
Thank you for that change. We want to make sure it's correct. That's perfect.
My paper says 5283.
Do you know, it's funny because our packet says 5283. I think it just got transposed on this sign, but yeah.
I type a lot.
Nope, it's perfect.
Clarify or?
No, it's okay.
I think we're good. Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Nason.
Okay, now I'll get it right. Sorry, Travis.
You're fine.
All right. Mr. Lowry?
Yes.
Mr. Nay?
Yes.
Mr. Hacker?
Yes.
Miss Milkevich?
Yes.
Miss Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Pearson?
Yes.
And Miss Patterson?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, those will both move on to the City Council. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, is there any other business for the commission? No? Is there
I think we have some training yet tonight.
Oh, yeah. Still going.
Our public training that we'll be doing right now, starting up. We do need to schedule it before the end of the year. I haven't got any time yet for it. We'll get it.
Okay, great. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn at 10:20.
Second?
Second.
Meeting adjourned.